Chapter 379. This is my wife, not my brother. The man who had been laughing so hard that his entire face was contorted said while trying to hold back his laughter. Fuck. Why didn't you say so earlier? So there is a woman here. Jianghu was dumbfounded. Then he suddenly realized that this beating was really undeserved. If I had known that there was a woman here, I wouldn't have told you dirty stories. That's just looking for trouble. Jianghu looked at this female shadow maliciously. Then he shook his head in schadenfreude. Damn it, your wife? She looks more like your brother. Her chest isn't protruding and her buttocks aren't perky. What's there to be happy about? While they were talking, they had already arrived in front of this Chunyang peak. Tai Butian raised her head and looked at this peak. Then she suddenly thought of this story that Chuyang had told her. She couldn't help but feel nauseous. She couldn't help but vomit a few times. Too disgusting. She frowned and said, Minister Chu, do you have any way to push down this peak? Let's discuss it. Ever since she had heard that story, Tai Butian suddenly felt that this mountain peak was an eyesore. She couldn't wait to push it down. She had originally thought that it was a pity to destroy such a beautiful scenery. But now, she didn't have the slightest bit of pity. Such a blasphemous thing. Moreover, it was so filthy and unbearable to look at. How could it be so openly preserved? No, absolutely not. Of course I have considered this. Chuyang wanted to cry but had no tears. He rubbed his waist. Then he used his fingers to gently press the bruises on his face. He bared his teeth. Only when he felt that his teeth were still there and hadn't moved did he feel relieved. Then he said, Look over there. There is a slope over there. This slope is just right. If you walk down this slope there will be nothing below. You can just follow it down. The man looked and measured it with his feet. Then he nodded and said, Yes, that's right. If we calculate it according to the human body, it is a transitional state between that thing and the lower abdomen. Do you want to die? Both of them gnashed their teeth and looked at him. They suddenly realized that they had misspoken. So they kept quiet out of fear. Yes, that's the place. You have a good eye. Your judgment is very accurate. Chuyang said recklessly. But he saw 4 angry gazes. So he wisely changed the topic and said, You see, as long as we hollow out this side and then hollow out the other side, we can pry this mountain peak down with the help of some tools. Empty? Ing suddenly lost his confidence and said, Didn't you see? This mountain was originally a single piece of rock. It was much harder than ordinary rocks. Even if there were divine weapons, they wouldn't be able to withstand such torment. Moreover, it was so huge. It was an understatement to say that it was millions of kilograms. How much strength do you need to pry it open? Naturally, we won't be prying the entire mountain peak, but the upper section. Chuyang said confidently, As for the matter of hollowing out the rocks, leave it to me. You guys are only responsible for moving the rocks. You can also throw these stones down directly. They should be able to cause a lot of damage and they can also open up a path for the mountain to roll down. The 2 figures looked at him with distrust. Chuyang smiled and said, The only thing I'm worried about now is whether the heaven-splitting mountain pass can withstand such a big shock. It would be self-defeating if the entire heaven-splitting mountain pass were to collapse because of this shock. And we'll end up ruining our own way of survival. You don't need to worry about this. Tai Butian smiled and said, Minister Chu, do you know that this heaven-splitting mountain pass has existed for thousands of years? All the countries that have occupied the heaven-splitting mountain pass have always regarded it as an important military base. It's an impregnable natural stronghold. Especially 700 or 800 years ago. The country that had occupied this place at that time had suffered a loss here. Then, the monarch ordered that the entire base of the heaven-splitting mountain pass city wall be molded with pig iron and molten with molten iron. Later they found out that this method was effective. So the entire city wall was molded with pig iron. Tai Butian said, Our iron cloud has overthrown that country. But there has never been an accident since we've occupied this place. In fact, it's been reinforced and repaired every year. And this pig iron molded city wall is the main reason why Diwu Qingro hasn't been able to do anything about it for so many years. Tai Butian smiled and said, Otherwise, wouldn't it have been easy for him to break through the heaven-splitting mountain pass if he had brought too many of those powerful siege crossbows? I'm relieved if that's the case, Chuyang secretly exclaimed in admiration. Fuck. The front of the city wall is molded with pig iron. What am I worried about if that's the case? Then he said to Tai Butian, Your Majesty, please step aside. You'll be a hindrance if you stay here? His first sentence had made Tai Butian feel sweet in her heart. It's rare for this guy to be so considerate. But she wanted to kick him when she heard his second sentence. What kind of nonsense is this? What do you mean by a hindrance? She bitterly turned around and walked to the side. Then she sat down on a large piece of flat ground. Chu Yang took a big stride forward, and a sword appeared in his hand with a clang sound. Then he exerted his martial power, and the cold energy suddenly became awe-inspiring. Cold ice energy? The two shadows were gobsmacked. They felt that it was inconceivable that Chu Yang could hollow out the mountainside with just a sword. But they were even more curious about his martial arts. Cold ice energy? Isn't it the signature martial art of some super clan of the upper three heavens? No, this isn't cold ice energy. It's even more powerful than cold ice energy. 17 cold energy. Chu Yang shook his head and said, "Pay attention, it's time to work." The long sword pierced in with a schwa sound. Then it cut through the hard mountain peak from left to right like cutting tofu. What a sharp sword. The two shadows were gobsmacked. They had seen many divine weapons. But this was the first time in their lives that they had seen such a thing. It doesn't make any sound when it cuts through such a hard rock. This was simply an unfathomable favor. No wonder you were able to fight your way back from Great Jiao. It turns out that you have such a divine weapon with you. The shadow sighed. Of course. Chu Yang laughed. He sliced 3 times with his sword, and a rock that wasn't very big, only half a foot thick, was taken out by him and casually tossed to the side. A small crack appeared at the base of the mountain peak. The two shadows knew that this was the beginning of the real work after Chu Yang had made a crack in the bottom of the mountain peak. Sure enough, the next piece of rock that Chu Yang pulled out was as big as a calf. It weighed several thousand pounds. The entire mountain peak was separated from the mountain peak. The shadow took it in his hand, walked a few steps, and threw it down the slope with a bang. Then another piece, and another piece. Thus, in this early morning, the rumbling of thunder began. It was more than 10,000 feet from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the slanting valley. It was at least 30 to 40,000 feet high. The people on the ground didn't know what was happening up there. The 3 tiger generals of Great Jiao and Wu Kuangyun in the heaven-splitting mountain pass heard the rumbling sound. Everyone hurriedly got up and looked at the sky. The 3 tiger generals were so worried that they almost cried. It won't be fun if there's a heavy rain in this kind of weather. Many of Great Jiao's soldiers and horses were camping in the open air. The terrain of the slanting valley was low. Wu Kuangyun was very excited. Motherfucker, it's raining? It's raining. The bigger the better. It'll be best if it drowns you bastards. Everyone ran out to take a look. They were dazzled by the rising sun. The sky was clear for thousands of miles. How could it rain? However, this rumbling sound was getting louder and louder. What was going on? Moreover, the rumbling sound was endless. It had connected into one. The valley was also echoing with the rumbling sound. Rumble. Rumble. Slowly, the entire valley started to tremble. The mountains also started to tremble. Even the heaven-splitting mountain pass was far away. But it was also trembling. Everyone felt a sense of dread. Is it an earthquake? Wu Kuangyun's complexion changed. He firmly supported himself on the city wall. His black face was full of shock. Fuck me. We're done for if an earthquake collapses the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Finally, an officer of Great Jiao's army who was still in the slanting valley screamed. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His entire body trembled as he pointed at the cliff opposite him. He screamed, it's not good, it's not good, ah. His words had become meaningless murmurs. The rumbling sound was getting closer and closer. It was close to the ground. Many soldiers in the slanting valley raised their heads. They were stunned to find that a big square stone was falling from above their heads. It seemed as if it was falling from the sky. It carried a thunderous aura that could destroy everything. It was tumbling down from the sky as it smashed down. In the dust that filled the sky, one could vaguely see that behind this huge rock, there were countless squarish figures rolling over. Their aura was so powerful that it could shatter the heavens and split the earth. Surging violently, they lined up and descended in a single line. It carried a formidable momentum. Quickly dodge. The officer shouted. Blood spurted out from his throat. His eyes were full of despair. Dodge? Where can I dodge? There's nowhere to hide. The huge stone rumbled down. Then it rushed into the dense crowd. It went on a rampage all the way. Sparks were flickering all over its body. It rushed forward in an unbridled manner. It rushed forward in an unbridled manner. Screams and blood were heard everywhere. Rumble? A big stone had fallen from a height of at least 8,000 meters. It had fallen to the ground. What would it feel like to borrow the momentum of 8,000 meters? How powerful would it be? Chapter 380. These boulders had stirred up a lot of dust along the way. Moreover, the boulders had been exposed to the wind and the sun for a long time. But they hadn't fallen off yet. It was hard to tell how many boulders had fallen off. In fact, a small mountain peak had collapsed along with this boulder flow. My goodness, this is the end of the world. Dust was flying in front of the heaven-splitting mountain pass. It was so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers in front of one's face. However, the boulder that had taken the lead in rushing down the mountain seemed to have opened up a path ahead of the others. It had bravely and fiercely rushed forward for more than 1,000 feet. The momentum of the boulder had finally stopped. Then, the second boulder, the third boulder, and the fourth boulder, the boulders continued to fall down like dumplings. It seemed that there would be no end to this. The screams of the people below were drowned out by the earth-shattering sounds of the falling boulders. The entire slanting valley was in a tragic state. The people near the exit of the slanting valley were fine. However, these boulders were rolling down the slope. They were smashing and rushing towards the inside of the slanting valley. The entire slanting valley was divided into 3 sections. The latter section was safe and sound. Flesh and blood were flying in all directions in the middle section. But the first section was also safe and sound. However, the section where flesh and blood were flying in all directions was close to 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Neither the men nor the horses were lucky enough to survive. Wu Kuangyun had only seen the dust and smoke rising from the top of the heaven-splitting mountain pass. The rumbling sounds had been unceasingly heard. Then the entire slanting valley had been filled with dust and smoke. His ears had been shaken to the point that he couldn't hear anything. His whole body had been shaken by the tremors. He only knew that something had happened to the great Zhao's army in the slanting valley. But he didn't know what had happened. He was too far away. So, he couldn't see the boulders falling down from the top of the mountain. He could only guess in his heart, what's going on? What's going on? My God, my God, my God, who knows about my hardships? So, he came down and gave me such a pleasant visual and auditory feast. He had felt the tremors under his feet. Many of the weapons that had been placed on the ground had been shaken, and had been sent flying. Then they had fallen down. Fortunately, this heaven-splitting mountain pass was extremely sturdy. This kind of vibration simply couldn't shake its iron foundation. Therefore, it was able to survive. However, one of the city walls inside had collapsed. Fortunately, it was towards his own country. Otherwise it would be over. Wu Kuangyun prayed in his heart. He rejoiced and then gloated, "Kill those bastards. Kill them all." Thousands of boulders smashed down. If it was a normal siege, such rolling boulders wouldn't cause much damage. But, how could it be the same as being thrown down from the top of the city walls when it was 8,000 meters in the air? If one had to make a comparison, it could only be said that one was an elephant, and the other was the hair on the elephant's leg. Finally, the thousands of rocks were smashed into the ground. Only then did the surrounding mountains stop shaking. Everyone's ears were still ringing, but in reality the sound had already stopped. Millions of people lost their hearing at once. The people who were still alive could only see each other's mouths opening and closing. But they couldn't hear what each other was saying. The 3 tiger generals came out of their tents with pale faces. Their eyes were full of fear. Their mouths were open and their eyes were blank. They were still baffled as to why such a thing had happened. They shook their heads with all their strength and patted their ears. They washed their faces with cold water and poured water into their stomachs. After a while they could barely hear a little bit of sound. They looked all the way out and saw that most of the soldiers had 2 lines of blood hanging from their ears. Apparently their eardrums had been damaged by the huge tremors. In fact, many of them had become deaf. What's going on? What's going on? The Golden Tiger General Jin Nankai roared. His complexion was ferocious. But everyone around him was staring at his mouth. So no one could hear him. Don't be impatient. The Silver Tiger General Long Ao patted Jin Nankai's shoulder. His complexion was very ugly. After a while, earth-shattering screams and cries were heard from the slanting valley. The sound spread for miles. It must be the enemy's surprise attack. Yu Qinglong shook his head. He still felt uncomfortable in his ears. There seemed to be a rumbling sound inside. Otherwise, it seemed as if 10,000 cicadas were desperately crying inside. But he could finally hear the sound. Let's go and take a look. The 3 of them looked at each other. They felt that something was wrong. They summoned their personal guards and mounted their horses. Then they went towards the place where the cries were the most tragic. They galloped their horses for 20 miles. Then they finally saw the scene of hell on earth. The three of them had been on the battlefield for a long time. Moreover, each of them was a desperado. So, what kind of tragic scene hadn't they seen? But their complexions couldn't help but change when they saw the tragic scene in front of them. Their bodies swayed, and they felt as if they were about to fall from their horses. They saw the slanting valley in front of them. The big stones had been dyed red. They quietly stayed on the ground, not moving at all. There was blood and flesh all along the way. Broken limbs and body parts were everywhere. Looking around, there was not a single complete corpse to be found in the empty slanting valley. Even the walls on both sides of the valley were stained with blood and flesh. Even the walls of the valley were hundreds of feet high. They were dripping with blood. The red was blood and the white was brain matter. They were everywhere. Some injured soldiers were lying there not far from the three of them. Their muscles and bones were broken. Their bodies were covered in blood. The luckiest one among these people had a broken arm. Their lives would have been lost if they had been grazed by those crazily flying big stones. The injured ones had only been lightly grazed by the edge of the stones. This section, how many people are there? Jin Nankai looked at the inhumane scene in front of him. He asked in a trembling voice. No one answered. Everyone was somewhat stupefied. They numbly looked at the scene in front of them. Their hearts were bleeding. Go and take a look, Long Ao ordered in a low voice. Then someone resisted the urge to vomit. He turned over and mounted his horse. The warhorse didn't listen to him. It opened its frightened eyes and shook its head. His body shrank back little by little. It wouldn't rush forward no matter what was said. In the end, he had to get on the horse of one of Jin Nankai's bodyguards and rush out. The sound of the horse's hoofs gradually faded away. Jin Nankai, Long Ao, and the other two frowned. They listened to the sound of the horse's hoofs coming from the slanting valley. It seemed as if they were walking on a silent road. Their complexions couldn't help but become more and more unsightly. They waited until the sound of the horse's hoofs had almost disappeared. After a while, the sound of the horse's hoofs was heard again. It was obvious that the horse had returned. There's no one for 7 or 8 miles. Yu Qinglong's face was calm as he said in a low voice. He didn't wait for anyone to return. He had only heard the sound of the horse's hoofs. The complexions of the other two changed. They had become miserable. 7 to 8 li, considering the density of the soldiers just now, how many soldiers could this slanting valley, which was 20 to 30 zhang wide, hold? They didn't dare to say more than 10,000 people. In other words, at least 10,000 people had died in this sudden incident. However, all of this was still inexplicable. No one knew why this had happened. They only knew that these stones had rolled down the steep slope of the mountain. They raised their heads and looked at the precipitous cliff above their heads. They couldn't see anything. They could only see clouds and mist above them. Look at these stones, Long Ao reminded. Yes. The three men turned around. Someone had already wiped a stone clean. Then they carried it over. This stone had been knocked down all the way. So, its volume had become a lot smaller. There were traces of bumps and collisions everywhere. 3 big stones were carried over. The 3 men surrounded them and carefully examined them. What's going on? This stone seems to have been cut by someone. The size of each stone is so uniform. Jin Nankai said in shock. It's impossible, right? The 2 men sized up the stones over and over again. Then they were shocked. They finally admitted this fact. Could it be that the enemy had set up an ambush on this mountaintop? Is this a rolling stone? This is absolutely impossible. Jin Nankai had been to Iron Cloud before. He flatly rejected this idea. It's difficult for birds to fly around these mountain peaks. Not to mention a human, even an ape would probably fall to its death if it tried to climb up. Only a king-level expert could go up there. Or even higher. But, why would such a person make things difficult for us if he was really such a person? Long Ao said disapprovingly. Perhaps, it's just a fight between immortals and mortals suffer a calamity? Or perhaps there was a section of the cliff above. So, it's possible that it had suddenly collapsed. After all, these mountains have existed for tens of thousands of years. Jin Nankai stared at the illusory clouds and mist above his head. He sighed and said, "Put these stones aside. Nothing should fall down." He sighed after he finished speaking. Then he turned around and walked back. Yes, it's impossible for a large number of soldiers to be on the mountaintop. It must have been a battle between experts. And it's over now. So nothing should have fallen down. Even if it was a landslide, there was no reason for it to happen one after another. What's an expert? An expert wouldn't be childish enough to throw stones for fun. Tiger General Jin was very confident that his decision was correct. Moreover, these stones would have split the army into two halves if they had been left here. Or, what's the point of fighting? The three men were in low spirits. They didn't speak much on the way back. However, they were praying in their hearts. Please don't let this happen again. Chu Yang and the two shadows were squatting on the ground and gasping for breath on the mountaintop. Even a king-level expert would have been paralyzed by exhaustion after continuous high-intensity labor. The three men had dug out a big hole at the bottom of the mountaintop in the last 2 hours. Chapter 381. This gap was 5 feet high from top to bottom. If one were to rush towards the top, one would only be able to reach a depth of a few hundred feet. This gap had already reached half of the thickness of the entire mountain. It looked like a giant had suddenly opened its ferocious mouth. This side is almost done. Minister Chu's image had completely disappeared. He was sprawled on the ground and was moaning incessantly, "My God! I'm so tired. I didn't get any benefits." What he meant was that he had done the same job several times. The first time he had obtained the sword tip of Calamity Sword. The second time he had obtained the mysterious ice jade ointment. He had also obtained so many mysterious ice jades. Only this time he had obtained nothing. He sighed and quickly took out a bottle and poured it down his throat. Gulp, 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 gulp. Little, bring the water over. Let's drink it together. The shadow groaned. Small. This water is quite precious, I only have this much. Chu Yang suddenly remembered that he was holding the Vitality Spring water. Nonsense. It's just a bottle of water. The male shadow snatched it but didn't drink it. He gave it to the female shadow first. The female shadow took it and drank it. Just as the water entered her throat, she felt something strange. Suddenly he felt that something was wrong. He could not help but be stunned. He stopped drinking and carefully felt around in his mouth. Suddenly he exclaimed in shock, "Vitality Spring water?" The other shadow was startled when he heard the voice calling out to him. She didn't care about her tiredness. She jumped up and rushed over to take a look. Vitality Spring water? Was it that wonderful spring water that could stimulate people's vitality? The two of them tasted it and were speechless. Then they couldn't help but cry. Even his 4 steady hands started to tremble slightly. They looked at each other and saw the bitterness in each other's eyes. Sure enough, it was the Vitality Spring water. The two of them had gone to the medicine deity clan several times to beg for the Vitality Spring water. They had even used up all of their family's wealth and used all of their methods, whether it was by force or by fraud, just to gather some rare tools and bring them to the Medicine King Valley to exchange for a few drops of the Vitality Spring water. They only needed a little bit of the Vitality Spring water to expand their body's vitality, and their aging body would be able to make a breakthrough. They only needed to break through to the Emperor level. Although it was only a thin line, it was an earth-shaking change. However, he still couldn't get what he wanted. The two of them were already in despair. That was why they had accepted a commission more than 10 years ago to come to the lower 3 heavens to protect Tai Budian. But who would have thought that after more than 10 years, when the two of them were already in despair, they would inadvertently come across this miraculous spring water, and so much more. He was holding it in his hands. This was a divine item that everyone in the Great Heaven continent yearned for even in their dreams. There is actually such a huge jug here. So it was because of this tool. No wonder he said, "This water is more precious. I only have this much." This was more than just precious. It was a priceless treasure. Not to mention a lot, just the little bit that the two of them had tasted just now, even though it was just a small mouthful each, was enough for the two of them. Furthermore, it was an excessive amount. If that small mouthful was converted into money, then using the word priceless to describe it was definitely not wrong. In fact, it was even better. In an instant, the two of them looked at Chu Yang in shock. It was as if he had seen a monster. Even the Medicine God clan's Medicine King Valley's Vitality Spring water didn't have much in stock. It definitely wouldn't be enough to fill a chamber pot for a year, right? It didn't even have half of this. That was the entire Medicine King Valley's annual supply. And this teenager, King of Hell Chu, actually had so much in his hands. And this person who had the Vitality Spring water actually treated it as ordinary water. He only used it to quench his thirst. Thinking of this guy's 2 mouthfuls just now, the two of them were about to go crazy. Do you know what this is? Ing grabbed the Vitality Spring water, as if it was the most precious treasure in the world. In fact, his eyes were red. I know. When he gave it to me, he said so. Chu Yang said casually. Then why are you wasting it like this? Ing was about to go crazy. Using the Vitality Spring water to quench your thirst? Heavens, have you ever seen such a prodigal person? Isn't it just a mouthful of water? Chu Yang snorted and said, Are you drinking or not? If you don't drink, then I will take it back. Wait. Ing glanced at him. Then he took out their water flask and drank it clean. He shook it and poured in a few mouthfuls of Vitality spring water. Then he plugged the lid. Chu Yang's heart was moved. These two people were not greedy. Looking at their personalities, they were also very straightforward. Tai Butian trusted them so much. It was worth it. But then he changed his mind. He saw Ing walk up to Tai Butian and said a few words to him. Tai Butian was obviously shocked. Then he shook his head resolutely. Shadow said a few more words and saw that Tai Butian only shook his head. Then he took off a small kettle from Tai Butian's body and poured the water out. Then he poured the entire kettle full of Vitality spring water. Then he handed it to Tai Butian. Then he walked over with a red face. He smiled embarrassedly and handed the water flask to Chu Yang. Oh. Have you finished distributing? Chu Yang shook the water bottle and smiled meaningfully. There's still a year and a half left in it. I took advantage of you. Ing smiled embarrassedly and said, But this tool, no need to explain. Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and smiled. He said, Since I'm willing to take it out for you to see, I wouldn't have taken it out if I didn't want to, right? He blinked. I'm very happy that it's useful to you. Ing looked at him for a long time. Then he said, You are very good. Very good. The other Ing also nodded deeply. How could it be just, very good? If others had so much Vitality spring water, who would give it to others for free? Even if it was just a drop. But this king of Hell Chu is not stingy with his own people. Tai Butian's eyes were intentionally or unintentionally looking at this side. Her small ears were slightly erect. Although she looked indifferent and cold, she was paying full attention to the news here. When she heard Ying's words, the corners of her mouth quietly revealed a gentle and satisfied smile. It seemed that she was happier when someone praised Chu Yang than when she was praised. Then Ing Yu said, Don't worry. We'll take good care of His Majesty. We won't let him suffer the slightest harm. Chu Yang was startled. He said, This? What do you mean? I'm just giving you some tools in passing. What does this have to do with His Majesty? You guys take good care of him. This is your responsibility. Why are you taking care of me? Tai Butian gently coughed on the other side. Ing was startled. Then he sighed and lowered his head in silence. Have you rested enough? It's almost time for us to continue our work. Chu Yang stretched himself and stood up as he said. Okay. The three people went around to the back of the mountain peak and started to move. But the stones were still moved to the front and thrown down. Although this amount of work was a little heavy, it was still a considerable amount of damage to the people below. The soldiers below were originally hiding far away. But there was no news from Old Man Yi. It wasn't right for the infantry to be split into two. So people gradually came in to clean up the traces. After the sad cleaning, the infantry was finally united again. But when they looked at the clear traces above their heads, they couldn't help but tremble. As a soldier, dying on the battlefield is nothing. But dying like this without knowing the reason for it is really frightening and depressing. However, the commander-in-chief had said that there would be no tools left behind this time. Therefore, everyone felt more at ease. After the cleaning was done, everyone sighed in twos and threes and gathered together again. After a while, what's that sound? Someone's ears twitched. There's really a sound. Someone frowned. Thunder? It's coming again. The guys are running away. Sure enough, the rumbling sound slowly became louder and louder. Later on, the mountain started to tremble. The earth started to beat again. The people felt ashamed again. The faces of Jin Nankai and the other two turned deathly pale when this terrifying sound resounded again. It's coming again. Ancestor. How can this be? As expected, there was no other sound in the entire world. Countless square and upright rocks once again rolled down from the height of 8,000 meters with a thunderous momentum. Then, the rocks fell from the sky like a thunderclap and rolled down from the sky like a thunderclap. They fell into the crowd and rushed forward unstoppably, opening up a bloody path among Great Zhao's army like a hot knife through butter, bravely rushing to the end of their stillness. Shini? What a tragic display of extravagance. Wu Kuangyun on the heaven-splitting mountain pass was so excited that his ears were stuffed with cotton strips. He was crazily shaking his buttocks along with the trembling of the mountain pass. Who asked you to invade us? Motherfucker. Heaven will punish you. Heaven won't let you off. Ha ha, this is too satisfying. The chaos of wailing ghosts and howling wolves was drowned out by this huge sound in an instant. This chaos continued for another 2 hours. Only then did they slowly come to a stop. Once again the army had paid the price of more than 10,000 casualties. In fact, the number of casualties was even higher than the previous time. This time the distance of the rock was much longer than the previous one. The last time the rock fell, it had already made the ground of the canyon much more solid. Now it was falling again. It was not elastic at all. Even the cushioning effect was pitifully small. It went all the way to the edge of the canyon. They had encountered such a terrifying thing twice in a row. Jin Nankai and the other two couldn't sit still any longer. They looked at the deathly pale faces of the surrounding soldiers, and their eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 382. Great Zhao's army was huge. The 3 legions that had gathered here were all elites. Moreover, there were more than 1 million of them. But, no matter how many people there were, they couldn't keep up with this kind of consumption. Pack up the troops. Rather than not receiving any news, let's quickly retreat. Long Ao's complexion was heavy as he slowly said, "There's no use in staying here. Instead we'll be nibbled away by the enemy. Moreover, we'll be buried here if our escape route is cut off." The other 2 nodded repeatedly. In fact, the 3 of them understood that most of Ironclad's troops were firmly pinned down in the main battlefield. A small part of Ironclad's army was here and couldn't move. Nothing would happen to Nianyi Zhao's escape route. Long Ao had said this to give himself a reason to withdraw the troops. But now, at this critical juncture, everyone was already terrified. They would rather go to the main battlefield and fight with their lives on the line than stay here and face the possibility of falling boulders at any time. However, one of us must stay behind to prevent Wu Kuangyun from attacking while we're retreating. Jin Nankai looked at the other 2. "Who will stay behind?" "I'll stay behind," Long Ao insipidly replied. Jin Nankai and Yu Qinglong looked at each other and nodded. In the current situation the danger of staying behind was greater, but there was absolutely no danger of the entire army being wiped out. On the contrary, the army that went out could face the falling boulders at any time. This wasn't easy to control. The 3 of them quickly came to an agreement. The 2 armies would pass through the slanting valley at the fastest speed. Then Long Ao would lead his troops to retreat. Everything would be easy as long as they were outside the slanting valley. It's a pity that it wasn't easy to get this opportunity. Yu Qinglong sighed. He looked at the heaven-splitting mountain pass with regret. The other masked men also sighed. This kind of situation was very rare. Almost all of Ironclad's troops had been pinned down in the main battlefield. They didn't dare to move. Diwu Qingro had cleverly arranged 3 armies on the side. More than 1 million soldiers had been dispatched to chase after the enemy. They had rushed into the slanting valley and arrived at the heaven-splitting mountain pass. The heaven-splitting mountain pass was the most impregnable mountain pass in the world. However, it wasn't impossible to break through. The Zhao army had the advantage in numbers. So, they kept harassing the heaven-splitting mountain pass every day and night. As long as the supply wasn't exhausted, they could continue to attack the heaven-splitting mountain pass even at the cost of hundreds of thousands of casualties. Although the sacrifice was a bit too much, it was still better than breaking through the heaven-splitting mountain pass. In this chapter, Lone Hand's solo hand against D, and the achievement of expanding the territory for a long period of time, this amount of casualties was completely acceptable. And this was the strategy that the 3 fugitive generals had decided on. In fact, ever since they had marched here, the 3 of them had no intention of returning empty-handed. Even if it was 10 people against 1 person from Ironclad, this deal was still worth it. However, the faces of Ironclad's defenders were filled with exhaustion at the moment. They only needed to strengthen their attacks and harassment. Sooner or later they wouldn't be able to hold on. However, they couldn't withdraw their troops at such a critical juncture. This was extremely depressing. Since he had made up his mind to retreat, there was no time to lose. He immediately issued the order and ordered the army to get ready. All the officers and soldiers had been frightened by this frightening phenomenon. So, they immediately became energized when they received the order to retreat. They packed up their tools and left at lightning speed. Everyone couldn't wait to leave this place. More than 10% of the soldiers swore, "I'll never come back here in my lifetime as long as I leave this place. I'll kill myself at the mouth of the valley. It's better to die here than to wait for death here." Meanwhile, Minister Chu was chopping wood at the top of the mountain. The base of the mountain peak was almost empty. It looked very shaky and was on the verge of collapse. Moreover, Chu Yang was digging at the back of the mountain. He had only dug a long passageway. The top and bottom of the passageway didn't look too big. Otherwise, it would have been like trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. Then he also dug at the left and right sides. Only a small part of the passageway was left. It seemed that only a few feet of stones were still connected. The wind was blowing and it felt as if the city would collapse at any time. Chuyang used a few stones to support the back of the mountain. Then he carefully stuffed in a few long trees that he had cut. Then, behind the trees, he made a crowbar that was controlled by a few small crowbars. If he were to use the crowbars directly, the three of them wouldn't be strong enough. So, Chuyang had to borrow some strength again. Now, not only was the safety factor increased due to the distance, but the control of the crowbars had also increased by several times. For safety's sake, Chuyang even dug a small cave not far away. As long as the mountain peak collapsed, the three of them would immediately hide in that cave. Everything was ready. Chuyang said loudly, "Your Majesty, hide further away first. Plug your ears so that you don't get hurt." Tai Budian responded with a sound of acknowledgement. Then she unleashed her lightness skill and sprinted into the distance. She only stopped when she reached a flat ground in the distance, which was at least several thousand feet away. Her entire person had already become a small black dot. Then Chuyang waved his right hand and the three of them exerted their strength together. Di shouted, 1, 2, 3, push him down, push him down, push him down, spine down. The three of them exerted their strength at the same time. Holding the crowbars in their hands, they slowly pressed down. At this time they couldn't use too much strength. They had to test it bit by bit. Otherwise, if it shook and couldn't be pushed down, they would be powerless and fall down. The three of them exerted their strength at the same time. They all saw that the mountain peak seemed to shake slightly, but at this time the three of them had already used all their strength. Chuyang waved his hand, "Slow down, stop slowly. Don't relax your strength. Reduce your strength little by little." Instead of returning to his original position, Chuyang scurried up again. Based on what he had just discovered, he cut off a few more rocks. Then he moved the crowbar's force point a little. After thinking for a while, he cut off a few more rocks from the other side and threw them to one side. The two shadows watched Chuyang move back and forth under the almost empty boulder. They both broke out in cold sweat. If this boulder suddenly squats down, Minister Chu will immediately turn into a pool of blood. This guy's guts are really fat. Chuyang worked hard under the boulder as if he was embroidering a flower. Then he rushed out with a whooshing sound. The two shadows broke out in cold sweat. This bastard, he cut down the base of the mountain peak to a depth of less than 2 feet. He's really daring. Chuyang quickly ran to his position. Then he checked the setup of the link again. He adjusted it a bit. Then he held the crowbar and made a gesture, "Start." The three of them slowly exerted their strength at the same time. The mountain peak slowly tilted. The three king-level experts saw this situation. Their spirits were lifted. They mustered their strength and shouted, "Down." They fiercely concentrated all their strength and pressed it down. The mountain peak slowly tilted forward in super slow motion, like a giant with its head above the blue sky and its feet below the earth. It was rising and falling forward at a slow speed that made people grimace in pain. "Push it down. Withdraw." Minister Chu shouted. He threw down the crowbar and flew back with a whoosh sound. The three shadows whooshed and whooshed in succession. They flew 70 to 80 feet away and quickly entered the cave that they had dug in advance. The mountain peak fell down. It slowly accelerated as it fell down. It finally landed. Boom! The surrounding mountains trembled at the same time. Then the mountain slowly flipped over and rolled down the slope below the cliff. Boom! There was another tremor. It was as if the thunder god was beating a drum along the way. The entire Chenyang Peak was like a shooting star as it flew down from a height of 1,000 meters. The mountain peaks within a radius of several hundred miles started to disco dance at the same time, trembling in disco. This was especially true for the mountain where the main event took place. All the boulders on the mountain leaped 3 feet high into the air in high spirits, scrambling to be the first to follow behind the huge, Chenyang peaks. But as he rushed down the mountain, this kind of momentum was earth-shattering. When the giant mountain was halfway down, it was as if a landslide had occurred in all the nearby mountains. This was no longer a mudslide. Instead, it was a boulder flow. Most families used the analogy of mountains and tsunamis, and described the earth cracking and the mountains collapsing. But who had actually seen mountains and tsunamis, earth cracking and mountains collapsing? There was no doubt about it. Especially the emperor's army in the slanting valley. They had truly enjoyed a feast for their eyes. However, they would rather not see anything in their lives than to have such a feast for their eyes. Jin Nangkai and Yu Qinglong reorganized the army. They clapped their hands and bid farewell to Long Ao. Then they issued an order and the army set out. The emperor's men had their bows and arrows strapped to their waists. The army's order was like a landslide. Everyone rushed out. The two emperor's generals put on their armor and mounted their horses. They then sullenly walked at the front of the army. Then the soldiers lined up behind them. Then they retreated in an orderly manner. They were well trained. They were definitely excellent soldiers. However, everyone's face was full of fear and sorrow. Even the war horses seemed to have sensed the gloomy atmosphere of the army. They were listless and their eyes were lifeless. It didn't take long for them to travel more than a dozen miles. They would arrive at the slanting valley if they were to travel a few more miles. Jin Nankai's eyes were sharp as he shouted, "What are you all doing? We're only retreating temporarily. We haven't been defeated. We'll come back sooner or later." And this place would have become the emperor's territory by then. He paused for a moment and then said, "The emperor's generals, cheer up. That road is in front of us. We must speed up. We must rush over there in one spurt of energy. Do you understand?" "Yes." Everyone promised in unison. "Well, speed up. Release the ropes." Jin Nangkai and Yu Qinglong clamped their legs on their horses' bellies. Then their horses rushed out. The two of them couldn't wait to leave this damned place. Right at this moment, a loud and heavy sound suddenly rang out. Boom. Boom. Chapter 383. Then the galloping horses were jolted off the ground. The earth trembled fiercely. The mountain peak trembled. The trees on the mountain trembled violently. Jin Nangkai and Yu Qinglong fell down from their horses. They lay on the ground. Their complexions changed. From the looks of it, it was several times bigger than the previous 2 times. Then there was another dull explosion. Boom. The Maoji was in a mess. Not good. Not good. The big rocks are coming again. Everyone run. The mountain is collapsing. Oh no, Mother? Mother? Oh God, I have an 80-year-old mother at home. Let me go out alive. Fuck, will that bitch in my hometown steal someone after she dies of old age? Fuck his ancestors. I snatched a little beauty home before I came here. I didn't have time to enjoy her. Similar screams and complaints were heard all over the place. The entire group was in chaos. Some of the bolder ones had already run out of the group and were running for their lives. Everyone knew that as long as they ran out of here they would be fine. Immediately some people ran out. There were also some who tried their best to retreat. However, the place was densely packed with people. Where could they retreat to? Fuck your mother. Don't push. Get back. Anyway, the old man is going to die. Why are you fucking pushing? Brothers, let's go. Everyone rushed forward. They didn't notice that Jin Nangkai and Yu Qinglong were still lying on the ground. They stepped on their bodies and crazily rushed forward. However, in this chaotic place, there was another huge boom. It drowned out all the sounds and movements. The mountain peak trembled. Oh, boom. The sound of the explosion became more and more intense. The rocks on the cliffs of the surrounding mountains began to fall down like raindrops. Boom, 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 boom. The sound of the explosion formed a dense line. It was getting closer and closer. Finally, a mountain fell down from the sky in front of everyone's horrified eyes. It fiercely smashed on top of everyone's heads. Boom. A deafening sound rang out, as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was collapsing. The mountain peak slammed into the mountain wall of the slanting valley. Everyone within a radius of several hundred feet fell to the ground at the same time without making a sound. Blood flowed out of their 7 orifices simultaneously. Then, like an elephant stepping into a wheat field, the mountain rumbled and rolled forward along the slanting valley. Wherever it went, broken limbs and body parts flew all over the sky. It unstoppably opened up a bloody alley, and advanced with large strides towards the place where it had leaped into. Jin Nangkai and Yu Qinglong were 2 arrogant and unruly generals. They didn't even have the time to scream before they were crushed by the huge boulder, and turned into 2 piles of blood and minced meat. As 2 of Great Zhao's 10 dragon and tiger generals, they had never achieved anything on the battlefield and had died in such an aggrieved manner under a large rock. It was truly lamentable. Moreover, they had been crushed to death in front of the million-man army they were leading. This made them even more speechless. When the later generations wrote about this period of history, they felt that they couldn't describe it. Therefore they wrote a paragraph. Great Zhao's generals, Jin Nangkai and Yu Qinglong, led their million-man army to the north. The road was cruel. The people had no way to make a living. The heavens were furious. They were struck by lightning and struck by lightning. Thus, the matter was settled after these two had been punished by the heavens. The huge boulder naturally moved forward in an unstoppable manner. At this time, the entire slanting valley was completely submerged by the boulder flow. Even the first half of the slanting valley that hadn't suffered the calamity of the previous two waves was also hit by the boulder flow. The boulders were pouring down from the mountains with a rumbling sound. How powerful was this? Not even half a scream could be heard in the midst of such a loud noise. More than half of the slanting valley was submerged by the boulder flow. Sand, dust, gravel and soil fell down, and buried the entire slanting valley. The mountain peak that had fallen down first bravely rushed forward for 30 li. Then it hit a corner with a bang. It trembled several times. Then it staggered to a stop. Dozens of people were crushed to death with a bang. The slanting valley was less than 300 feet wide. But this huge rock was 25 feet wide. So, the rock was as wide as one could walk. And the entire Ironclad army was pushed forward in such a manner. In fact, the entire Ironclad army had been transformed into a part of the River of Blood. This boulder would have rolled all the way to the edge of the heaven-splitting mountain pass if it weren't for the small corner that was 30 li away. It was very bold and powerful. It was no wonder that it carried the resentment of being a bachelor. So, it got angry when it saw these men with wives and concubines. This chaos came and went quickly. In fact, everything came to an end in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. The silence between the heaven and earth was frightening. There was no more passage outside the heaven-splitting mountain pass. That was because more than half of the slanting valley had been buried. It was completely filled up, forming a new short mountain. The slanting valley was still a slanting valley. However, the terrain was much higher. Moreover, everything had happened inside the slanting valley. So, it didn't affect the heaven-splitting mountain pass outside the slanting valley. A lot of stones had fallen inside the heaven-splitting mountain pass, and many people had been injured. However, it couldn't be compared to the miserable state of the great Zhao army outside. Long Ao's hands and feet turned ice-cold. He had helplessly sent Jin Nangkaiyu and Chenglong out. Then he had watched them leave. He hadn't even turned around when all of this had happened. Long Ao staggered and rushed over to take a look. Then he felt his vision go dark. He looked up and fainted. It was gone. It was all gone. Only half of the army that had been led by those two men remained here. The rest of the army had disappeared. The slanting valley had been filled up in front of Long Ao. There was nothing but rubble. Under the rubble, traces of blood could be seen flowing out slowly. A group of personal guards finally woke Long Ao up by pinching his chest and patting his back. But as soon as he woke up, he was immediately hit again. Blood spurted out of his mouth. He cried out in a heart-wrenching manner, "It's over, it's all over." Suddenly he thumped his chest and stamped his feet. Tears streamed down his face like rain. Perhaps, even the initiator of this disaster hadn't thought that his actions would bring about such a glorious result. Great Zhao's 3 tiger generals had led 500,000 troops to the front line. They had changed their route to the heaven-splitting mountain pass. So, they had brought 1.5 million soldiers with them. They had rushed straight to the front of the heaven-splitting mountain pass. They had stationed 300,000 soldiers in front of it. Many troops had been stationed in the slanting valley for more than 50 kilometers. However, less than 1/4 of the troops had been stationed outside the slanting valley. The number of casualties of Great Zhao's army had exceeded 100,000 because of the collapse. Jin Nangkai and Yu Chenglong had been leading their troops to retreat. So they had been smashed head-on. And they had been wiped out in one fell swoop. Moreover, the landslide had buried more than half of the slanting valley. And hundreds of thousands of people had been smashed inside with a plop sound. They had been buried alive. Great Zhao's army had become divided into 2 sections. They couldn't take care of each other. The people outside couldn't come in and the people inside couldn't go out. And the worst part was, the troops inside didn't have any supplies. However, the troops outside had become like headless bees. They were in a mess. The 3 great generals were inside. And the highest-ranking officers in the troops outside were only deputy generals. Moreover, these deputy generals didn't have the opportunity to assume personal responsibility under the strong leadership style of these 3 great generals. However, they had encountered such an earth-shattering event. So they had become numb. Wu Kuangyun was inside the heaven-splitting mountain pass. He had finally seen what had happened. He would have been stupid if he hadn't seen what had happened. He was so happy that he jumped up and shouted on the spot. "Great General! Great General! Wu, do you want to go out of the city?" Wu Yi's expression was solemn. "Stop. Uncle, I'll say it for you, okay?" Wu Kuangyun's liver and intestines felt uncomfortable as he heard this. He raised his hand and asked, do you want to go out of the city and annihilate the enemy? Wu Yi nodded his head vigorously. Wu Kuangyun said, I'll say no. Do you want to ask again, why don't you want to go out of the city? Wu Yi nodded. Wu Kuangyun proudly said, I'll say now, they've become a crippled army. They're done for if they don't fight. Do you want to ask again, why are they done for? I'll say now, they don't have food? Do you want to ask again, why don't they have food? I'll say now, because of a landslide. Do you want to ask again? Ouch. He hadn't finished speaking when Wu Yi ruthlessly kicked him. He was sent flying in the air. He flailed his arms and legs as he fell far away. Wu Yi snorted. His complexion was ashen. He turned around and walked away. Motherfucker, you're not done yet? I just stuttered a little. Wu Kuangyun crawled up while covering his buttocks. He flew into a rage. Wu Yi, you're a deputy general. How dare you beat up the great general? Have you eaten a leopard's gall? I'll report you to the imperial court. I'll remove you from your post and banish you to the army. He roared. But Wu Yi didn't look back. He didn't even pay attention to Wu Kuangyun. Wu Kuangyun was infuriated. He turned his head and looked at his bodyguard who was snickering. He scolded, What are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? You're happy to see me get beaten up, aren't you? No, General. The bodyguard stood at attention. No. Or you don't dare. Wu Kuangyun fiercely asked. No. I don't dare. Wu Kuangyun was satisfied. He patted the dust off his buttocks and swaggered away. He left with a burst of laughter behind him. Wu Kuangyun curled his lips and ignored them. He thought, I don't know what's going on. But it's a good thing. Long Ao will be defeated in one more day. I have to go and look for His Majesty. At this time on the hilltop, Chu Yang patted the dust off his body and jumped out of the pit. He twisted his waist and patted his buttocks. It seemed as if he had just done a trivial matter. He said in an incomparably relaxed manner, the matter is done. We should also go. Wu Kuangyun will commit suicide if we don't send His Majesty to the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Chapter 384. The two king-level experts' hearts were still thumping because of the big movement this time. When they turned their heads, they saw that this first-grade king-level expert had already jumped up. His face was as calm as the clouds and wind. Such a calm temperament at such an age. Both of them cried out in their hearts, what a freak. Tai Budian had already sat up. Her sleeves were fluttering as she walked over. Her expression was calm and composed. It seemed that she didn't care about the traces of cracks under her feet. Finished? Tai Budian asked with a smile. Finished. Chu Yang smiled. I estimate that Great Zhao's army will suffer some losses this time. Tai Budian smiled. Although it won't hurt them, they should be in a very difficult situation. Chu Yang laughed and said, according to my estimation, there should be 10 or 20,000 people. 10 or 20,000. Tai Budian was taken aback. She said, so many? Chu Yang laughed mischievously and said, Your Majesty, such a landslide is rarely seen in 10,000 years. It's absolutely possible. Both of them didn't know that the result this time was earth-shattering. How could a small landslide describe it? And the result this time was even more unimaginable to them. Even if someone were to tell them now, they would never believe that they had destroyed 100,000 of the enemy's troops this time. Not only that, but they also included two of the most famous generals in the continent. Ji Nengkai and Yu Qinglong. Let's go. Tai Budian smiled. In her heart, it was enough to cause some disturbance. Therefore she didn't have much hope this time. All right. Chu Yang laughed out loud and walked over. Suddenly there was a surge in his dantian. Tribulation sword point suddenly emerged. It clearly sent out a thought to prevent Chu Yang from leaving. Chu Yang stopped his footsteps with a butterfly sound. Tribulation sword point was a common thing. Chu Yang was very clear about it. This thing was a greedy guy. It wouldn't come out on its own initiative if it didn't see any benefits. Tribulation sword point was actually very puzzled. If it could speak, it would be very surprised. Go? Why do we have to go? We haven't gotten the good stuff yet. Why do we have to go? Don't tell me that you didn't ask me to dig up the mountain and put in so much effort to dig up treasures? If it wasn't for the treasure, why would we work so hard? Are we minors? Chu Yang could feel the dissatisfaction and grievance of the sword tip. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, how about this, I'll look around again. There seems to be something good here. Chu Yang was somewhat embarrassed. He touched his nose and looked very uncomfortable. After all, he was the one who had suggested to leave first. Now, everyone else had suggested to leave, but he had suggested to stay. How should he explain this? Shadow and Tai Butian had seen Chu Yang's ability to find elixirs. There must be some treasures in the vicinity if he has this kind of feeling. So, they agreed without prior consultation. They were also very curious to see what this mysterious king of Hell Chu would find in this barren mountain this time. What would he find? The sword point of the Calamity sword jumped in Chu Yang's arm, anxiously guiding the way. Chu Yang walked a few steps, and discovered that he was walking in the direction of the severed Chunyang Peak. Chu Yang couldn't help but touch his head. He thought to himself, could it be that my luck has exploded? I accidentally destroyed a mountain peak, but I still found a treasure? The closer he got, the higher the terrain became. And the more cheerful the sword point of the Calamity sword jumped. Tai Butian was walking behind him. She looked around and said with a smile, this mountain peak is very strange. This mountain is surrounded by verdant and lush forests. But this Chunyang Peak is the only place that is surrounded by rocks for dozens of miles. There isn't even a single big tree in sight. Minister Chu, it seems that the tool you made a moment ago has traveled a very long distance. Haha, you wouldn't have been able to topple this mountain in such a short time if it weren't for your superior martial power. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener took it seriously. Chu Yang heard Tai Butian's words, and his whole body suddenly trembled. It seemed as if an electric current had passed through his body. His footsteps suddenly stopped. Let's go. Let's go. No wonder I felt that this place wasn't normal. So that's how it is. There isn't a single tree in the vicinity. In fact, there isn't even a single tree for dozens of miles around the Chunyang Peak. I walked for more than 40 miles and found withered trees. And the trees within the radius of hundreds of miles aren't flourishing. Why is this? There's only one explanation for this situation. There's something here that can absorb spiritual energy for its own use. It's precisely because of the existence of this thing that the other plants have the opportunity to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. And it's making them wither. And a spirit herb that could have such a powerful ability could only be a legendary heavenly treasure, or a miracle herb or something like that. That must be it. Chu Yang's heart couldn't help but pound as he thought of this. He looked at the surrounding area. Not even a blade of grass grew for dozens of miles. And the trees within the radius of hundreds of miles had withered. And the trees only grew thicker and taller outside another big circle. This area had already exceeded the area where Chu Yang had found the Jade Snow Spirit Ginseng. In fact, it was at least twice as big. Could it be that it's a better elixir than the Jade Snow Spirit Ginseng? Chu Yang's heart throbbed. Tai Butian saw that he wasn't moving. So she asked curiously, why aren't you moving? Did you find it? No. Chu Yang calmed himself down. Then he walked forward. His target this time was obvious. It was the half-broken Chunyang Peak. Chu Yang walked closer and suddenly laughed out loud. Look, that thing is actually cut off from the middle. This port, this TSK, I reckon this dear friend won't be able to use it in the future. This fucking thing is worse than the eunuchs in the palace. At least, the eunuchs don't have anything. And they don't have any impulses. But this thing has been cut off from the beginning. It has all the functions, but it can't be used. Tai Butian suddenly became angry. Are you here to look for elixirs or to act like a rogue? The two shadows didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they watched Minister Chu spouting nonsense. Their hearts were full of helplessness. The ignorant are truly fearless. This guy wouldn't dare to be so presumptuous if he knew that Her Majesty was actually a woman? It's simply unbearable to look at. Minister Chu laughed as he finally arrived in front of the Chunyang Peak. It looked even more majestic and precipitous up close. Chu Yang stroked the broken part with a lewd smile on his face. He then said with emotion, I'm sorry. I was careless and cut you off. Tai Butian's face darkened. She turned her head and took a deep breath. She felt that her mind was clear. She couldn't help but say, I've never climbed a mountain. But I've heard that it's very difficult to breathe on the top of a mountain. This mountain is so high. So, it must be even more difficult to breathe, right? But it's not difficult to breathe here. What's going on here? Could it be that there's an elixir here? The expressions of the two shadows shook. Their countenance suddenly changed. What Tai Butian had said was common knowledge. But they hadn't felt anything since they had come up here. So, they had neglected this point. So, it seemed that the thing on this mountain wasn't just a treasure. In fact, it should be extraordinary. The tip of the sword trembled even more fiercely. It pointed directly at the broken part of the Chunyang Peak. Chuyang took a deep breath and jumped up. Suddenly, an extremely tired voice sounded in his consciousness. From one side, diagonally down people. Chuyang was startled. Petal Spirit? What have you been doing all this time? I called out to you but you didn't respond. Sword Spirit said in a weak voice, You're still talking. You went crazy and went head-on with the enemy. You were about to be smashed into pieces. But you fainted. Would you still be alive if I didn't help you block the attack? Unfortunately, you exhausted the spiritual power that I had accumulated for such a long time. So, I had no choice but to fall into a deep sleep. So, that's how it is. Chuyang was somewhat embarrassed. Well, I also felt strange about that night's matter. Why did I go crazy? I didn't even try to dodge. The Heavenly Lady has absorbed some of the power of the mysterious ice jade ointment these days. So, she has recovered 1 point. Otherwise, she wouldn't have woken up, Sword Spirit said. You should hurry up and get the elixir. I'll rest first. Wait, what's inside? You should know about this, right? Chuyang asked. What else can there be on the Chunyang Peak? Sword Spirit said in a bad mood. You know that all the things that are naturally formed in the world have its name. So they can't be aimless. After he finished speaking, he disappeared without a trace. Chuyang had a belly full of questions to ask him. But he had disappeared after a while. He had no choice but to touch his nose. Then he jumped down from above. He wielded the Calamity Sword on one side of the Chunyang Peak, and cut down with a schwa sound. Tai Budian looked on helplessly as Chuyang's seemingly ordinary cyan steel sword cut into the big rock as if he was cutting tofu. She couldn't help but be shocked. After a short while, Chuyang took out a big square rock and put it aside. Then he took out another one. The two shadows skillfully helped. They knew that Chuyang must have found something. However, they didn't have the slightest bit of greed in their hearts. They only had a simple thought: we must help him take out this treasure in its entirety. They had already taken a big advantage of Chuyang with the Vitality Spring Water today. This kindness was enough for them to be at his beck and call. So, how could they have the nerve to ask for a share of the loot? Besides, this was discovered by Chuyang. Chuyang had dug it out himself. Could it be that he wanted the elixir just by moving the rock? How could there be such a thing? Chuyang dug down 10 feet. A big pit had already appeared on the ground. Chapter 385. Chuyang's spirit was lifted. Looks like it's almost there. Sword Spirit said 10 feet. Now it's only 10 feet, but this is already happening. Doesn't this mean that this treasure is very awesome? When Chuyang threw out another big stone, the two figures who were guarding the entrance of the cave clearly felt that something was wrong. The bottom of this big stone was very soft. It was so soft that it could be poked with one's finger. Moreover, it was emitting a strange heat. About an inch at the bottom of this stone had turned dark red. It was this dark red color that was emitting a copious amount of heat. This kind of heat made one feel comfortable all over. Just as Chuyang was about to continue, there was a sudden vibration in his consciousness space. The Sword Spirit appeared again and said in a hurried voice, Be careful. Everything within a radius of 30 feet will be put into the tribulation space. Chuyang asked. Don't worry. Listen to me. Sword Spirit's dispirited spirit was suddenly lifted. His voice trembled as he sighed, I really admire your luck. You can do this. I'm really speechless. My luck is very good? Chuyang frowned and asked. It's not just very good. The Sword Spirit was a bit speechless. When you first came up, you found the sword tip and obtained a part of the Seven Shades Cold Chi. This was enough for you to not be injured under certain circumstances. Then, when you obtained the second fragment of the Calamity Sword, you obtained the Vitality Spring Water as a martial master. Moreover, it was a full spring. This spring water was supposed to disappear when we took out the second part of Tribulation Sword. But we kept it in the Tribulation space, which became an endless treasure trove. Then, when you chased after the enemy, you got a small part of Jade Spirit Ginseng. The sword point stole its medicinal power. This is very strange. Chuyang said, Jade Spirit Ginseng? Yes, Diwuqing Rose Jade Spirit Ginseng is only 3,000 years old, and there are only 2 thin pieces. But don't forget that this Jade Spirit Ginseng is very young. It's not qualified to be a real Jade Spirit Ginseng, but it's one of the most miraculous medicines in the world. It's like a newborn tiger. Even a rabbit can deal with it. But no one can deny that it's a tiger, right? Sword Spirit explained in more detail. Understood, Chuyang said. But it was this little bit of jade spirit ginseng's medicinal power that combined with the other medicinal powers to form the embryonic form of the heavy pill. It was this embryonic form of the heavy pill that stimulated the Calamity Sword's desire for large spirit herbs. It was equivalent to opening a person's spiritual wisdom. Do you understand? In other words, if you don't encounter these things, the Calamity Sword won't be in such a rush. That way, even if the great medicine is right in front of you, you might miss it. But now it's no longer possible. Then you found the mysterious ice jade paste. Moreover, it's a mature mysterious ice jade ointment. Sword Spirit exclaimed in admiration. This is a 10,000-year-old mysterious ice jade ointment. The price was simply impossible to estimate. Furthermore, it was one of the great medicinal herbs. Your good fortune has come one after another till today. I was sleeping, relying on the cold energy of the mysterious ice jade ointment to nourish my soul. But when you approached here, a burst of mysterious yang qi rushed in, yin and yang harmonized, and I suddenly woke up. Then I discovered that you actually found this treasure. What the hell is this thing? Chu Yang interrupted the Sword Spirit's chatter. He was somewhat impatient in his heart. Didn't you say that you were weak? Didn't you need to recuperate? Why did you come out and chatter? The mysterious yang jade is everywhere in the radius of 30 feet and 30 feet below. Mysterious yang jade, you idiot! Sword Spirit said excitedly. Mysterious yang jade? What's its use? Chu Yang asked. You dig it out first, Sword Spirit said impatiently. Chu Yang snorted and drew a big circle with the Calamity Sword. But he didn't get enough time to stretch out his hand, and the Sword Spirit impatiently put this big piece of mysterious yang jade into the Calamity space. Then Chu Yang saw that the mysterious yang jade and the mysterious jade inside the Calamity space had been arranged in a strange circle by the Sword Spirit. And the Sword Spirit sat down cross-legged in this strange circle. Pieces of mysterious yang jade were extracted, and the Sword Spirit accepted them all with a smile. Then the strange circle inside the Calamity space also became bigger and bigger. Finally, the last piece of mysterious yang jade was put into the Calamity space. Then Chu Yang's mind moved and he took out 3 pieces. The Sword Spirit was furious. He quickly took them back and said, "What are you doing?" He looked like an old hen protecting her chicks. In fact, he had almost risked his life to fight Chu Yang. What's wrong? Chu Yang was somewhat speechless. He pointed at the mysterious yang jade that was piled up like a mountain in the Calamity space and said, "You have so much. Take out some of it. How can someone help us? Besides, I didn't take out much. You can't be so stingy, right?" Not even a drop. Sword Spirit firmly controlled the Calamity space. He frowned and said, "Who asked them to help us? Can't we do it ourselves?" What a joke. Chu Yang felt a headache. He realized that he couldn't take out anything since the Sword Spirit was controlling the Calamity space. So he helplessly said, "Just this once." Just this once? Sword Spirit suspiciously looked at him. Just this once. Chu Yang nodded heavily. Alas, it's a pity, this mysterious yang jade is a genuine treasure. The Sword Spirit reluctantly looked at the 3 pieces of mysterious yang jade in front of his eyes. Then he put down 2 of them. Then he broke off the smallest piece of the mysterious yang jade into a palm-sized piece. Then he divided this small piece into 3 smaller pieces and threw them out. "Take them." Chu Yang almost fainted. I've seen stingy people. I've seen stingy people. But I've never seen such a stingy person. You almost poked a mountain yourself. But you're still reluctant to give a palm-sized piece of stone to someone else? You can't be stingy to this extent, right? However, Sword Spirit was already in a daze. He looked as if he was rejecting Chu Yang and said, "Do you want them or not? You won't even have these if you don't want them." Chu Yang forced a smile. "You're ruthless. Why aren't you working?" Sword Spirit roared, "Mysterious yang jade essence is below the mysterious yang jade. It's on the same level as the mysterious ice jade paste. It's one of the great miracle medicines. Why aren't you getting them? What are you waiting for?" What? Chu Yang was gobsmacked. In fact, he almost stuttered. He had thought that he would be overjoyed if he had obtained so much mysterious yang jade this time. But he hadn't expected that there would be such a pleasant surprise. He hastily turned around and saw that the mysterious yang jade was gone. Instead, the ground was flat. However, there was a place that was emitting a pink luster. Chu Yang approached it and gently picked it up with his sword. Suddenly, a thin thing was lifted up by him. This small thing quickly became smaller after it left the ground. Then it melted in the air. Below it was a small ball of pink stuff. It was squirming on the ground. Its appearance was similar to the mysterious ice jade essence. However, it was emitting an incomparably warm aura. It seems that this is the mysterious Yang Jade essence. Chu Yang's mind moved, and this small piece of mysterious Yang Jade essence entered the tribulation space. Sword Spirit exclaimed in pleasant surprise. He then put the mysterious Yang Jade essence into the vitality spring. Then he gasped for breath and happily said, "Very good. The yin and yang in the tribulation space will be harmonized this time. So there won't be any problem. Moreover, my spiritual power will increase rapidly after the yin and yang harmonize. So I'll be able to help you even more." Eh? Yin and yang harmonize? Chu Yang suddenly recalled the story that he had just told. So, he said in surprise, "Don't tell me that the story about the worldly bachelor is true?" "What worldly bachelor?" Sword Spirit looked at him in bewilderment and said, "What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" Chu Yang forced a smile. He had no choice but to repeat the story again. Then he said, "Isn't it true?" "It's true." Sword Spirit looked at him in a speechless manner. The mysterious Yang Jade essence has a very strict condition. That is, a lone peak must stand tall in the blue sky. It must be covered by the morning sun for 10,000 years. It must be connected to the pure yang energy of the blue dome of heaven. Do you understand? At the bottom of this mountain is the place where the dragon veins intersect. After a long time, after 10,000 years, this kind of heavenly treasure will slowly appear. So that's how it is. Chu Yang recalled the story. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then he suddenly thought of something. Doesn't that mean that this place will produce heavenly treasures in the future? After all, we haven't destroyed these dragon veins. That's for sure. Wait patiently. It will appear after 10,000 years. Sword Spirit sneered. The Tao factory opens after 10,000 years. In other words, this kind of thing will take at least 10,000 years to take shape. I'll wait. Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Damn it. Where will I be buried after 10,000 years? Even if I want to worship my ancestors, I won't be able to find it, right? So I'll wait? Chu Yang jumped out of the ground with a bang. He had been fiddling with the ground a while ago. So it was completely dark. So the people above couldn't see what he was doing. The three of them were happy to see him jump out. "You came out? Are you all right?" Tai Bu Tian asked. "I'm fine," Chu Yang replied. "That's good. Let's go." Tai Bu Tian took the lead to turn around and leave. The two shadows smiled warmly and followed behind Tai Bu Tian. They wouldn't ask Chu Yang what he had obtained. After all, it would only make Chu Yang feel embarrassed. This treasure was Chu Yang's. So how could there be any dispute? "Aren't you going to ask me what kind of treasure I've obtained?" Chu Yang asked in a puzzled manner. "It's yours. No matter what you've obtained, it's yours." The shadow patted Chu Yang's shoulder and smiled warmly. "So we won't ask." Chapter 386. Chu Yang flipped his wrist and said, "Now these belong to you three." Looking at the three thin pieces of jade in his palm, he said awkwardly, "Cough cough, they are a little small, but cough cough, there weren't many dogs to begin with." Chu Yang felt a little guilty when he said this. "They are not that big, they are not even as big as a mountain. But, what should I say? Should I say that the sword spirit of my calamity sword is stingy and won't give it to you?" However, the three people opposite him were stunned. Under the sunlight, the three pieces of pink jade in Chu Yang's palm emitted a bright red luster as if they were about to melt under the sunlight. They slowly emitted a dense mist. A burst of warm aura suddenly enveloped the three people. "Mysterious Yang Jade!" Shadow exclaimed. Then his eyes widened. His four eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets at the same time. No wonder this place is barren. No wonder this mountain peak is called Pure Yang Peak. Pure Yang, so this is it. It turns out that there is such a shocking treasure here that contains the power of pure yang. Mysterious Yang Jade. Shadow's eyes were brimming with tears. Such a treasure is not a legend. It really exists in this world. Tai Bu Tian didn't know what mysterious Yang Jade was, but seeing the reaction of the two shadows, she knew that this small piece of jade was extraordinary. "This jade. His Majesty can have it, but we can't." Shadow's eyes were fixed on the mysterious Yang Jade in Chu Yang's hand as he said with difficulty. "Why?" Chu Yang asked. "An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime." Shadow sighed. "Chi, we're not like you. One of you is carefree and can go anywhere you want while His Majesty is the ruler of a country. He rarely comes out. With such a treasure on him, there won't be any problems. But the two of us have clans. And we have to go back to our clans every once in a while? Shadow's expression was somewhat bitter. There was one thing he didn't say: as long as our clans know that we have such a thing, they will definitely take it back to our clans. The two of us are second-grade martial kings. This is good, but such strength is not valued in our clans. What's more, the two of them were already so old, and their future development wasn't favored by their families. Otherwise, why would he be sent to the lower three heavens? Can't you just keep it to yourself and not say anything? Chu Yang asked in surprise. I've already taken it out. Do you want me to take it back? Quo. The two shadows hesitated for a while and finally decided, how about this? We shouldn't have asked for it. Since you've said so, then let us husband and wife take one. Quo. As he spoke, he picked up the smallest and thinnest piece. Then he handed the largest piece to Tai Budian, but insisted that Chu Yang take back the other piece. For us to be able to take such a small piece is already a blessing to our ancestors, and a great advantage of you. Both shadows were resolute. As for Tai Buqian's piece, both of them felt that it was only right. For you, her martial path was ruined and she gave up the most precious thing as a woman. It's only right for her to take a piece of mysterious yang jade from you to nourish her body. Your Majesty, this piece of jade is called mysterious yang jade. You can wear it to nourish your body and even your divine soul. Moreover, it has the effect of warming your skin and maintaining your appearance. You're busy with state affairs and have to deal with thousands of affairs every day. It's inevitable that you'll be tired. But as long as you have this mysterious yang jade, you'll be immune to all kinds of diseases. Your spirit will always be full and you'll never feel tired. Moreover, it will never harm your body. Quo. Shadow solemnly exhorted, Your Majesty, this piece of jade must never be seen by others. In the future, this piece of jade can also be a national treasure. Quo. The heirloom of the country? Tai Budian was holding the piece of jade in her hand, feeling the warm aura. She was playing with it lovingly. When she heard Shadow's words, she was immediately shocked. National treasure? What kind of treasure could be a national treasure? As the ruler of a nation, how could Tai Budian not be clear about it? Only those heaven-defying treasures would be regarded as national treasures. I'll let this piece of jade accompany me forever. Tai Budian raised her head and said solemnly. These words had a profound meaning. At least, the two shadows felt that they had a profound meaning. However, Chu Yang didn't feel anything. The two shadows sighed in their hearts when they saw the expressions of the two people. Such a good marriage. Why does the man have someone else in his heart and the woman has a heavy burden on her shoulders? One has feelings and the other has misgivings. The other doesn't know anything about it. There are such strange emotional entanglements in this world. The four people went down the mountain. The four of them walked until the evening lanterns were lit. Then they crossed the mountains and arrived at the heaven-splitting mountain pass from another direction. Wu Kuangyun was burning with anxiety. That was because Long Ao was still outside the pass. It wasn't that he didn't want to move but that he couldn't. There was a mountain behind him. He was caught in such an awkward situation. He really wanted to cry but had no tears. Hundreds of thousands of people will climb the mountain if we want to retreat. As for riding a horse or taking a carriage, isn't that a fantasy? But hundreds of thousands of people will climb the mountain. Wouldn't Wu Kuangyun get annihilated if he comes out of the pass? Long Ao wouldn't dare to take his own head as a joke even if he had the guts to do so. Moreover, what would he do if he was lucky enough to climb the mountain, and then a huge boulder fell down? That's really hard to say. Therefore Long Ao could only endure. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. You. Wu Kuangyun received the report, and hurriedly came out to greet him. He was so excited that he almost cried. He wiped his eyes and was inexplicably moved. You're finally back. I'm about to commit suicide? Tai Budian smiled comfortingly and said, What's the hurry? I'm all right. How's the situation inside the pass? Quo winked with a frown. Now, the situation is very good. Wu Kuangyun's words left Tai Budian dumbfounded. Very good? Yes, waha. Today old Wu, am very excited. A mountain fell down from the sky and smashed these bastards to death. Wow. Wu Kuangyun grinned. Even if a mountain falls down, it can't smash them to death, right? Tai Budian frowned. This Wu Kuangyun is exaggerating, right? But this mountain can move, Your Majesty. This mountain tumbles along the slanting valley. Moreover, the mountains on both sides of the slanting valley are shaken by the fall of this mountain. That scene is spectacular. I heard that even Jin Nankai and Yu Qinglong were smashed to death. Great Zhao's casualties are more than 100,000. Quo. Wu Kuangyun was so excited that his face turned red. Now. 100,000, 100,000 your majesty. Kuo wink with a frown. 100,000 your majesty? Tai Buqian's forehead was covered with black lines. Your majesty has 100,000. What's the value of that? 100,000 emperors of a country? However, he also knew that Wu Kuangyun was extremely excited and incoherent. So he didn't take it to heart. Now, go in and see. Now. Tai Budian waved his hand. Wu Kuangyun had already arrived in front of Chu Yang. He patted Chu Yang's shoulder with his big hairy palm. Now, hey. Little, do you remember me, Great General Wu? Quo. Chu Yang raised his eyebrows. Now. I'm going to feed aphrodisiac to the warhorses. Quo. Wu Kuangyun was stunned for a moment. Then he angrily said, now. Motherfucker. Now, you've just met and you've already begun to expose my scars. He turned his head and was about to flip out. But he found that Chu Yang had already walked far behind Tai Budian. Wu Kuangyun caught up with them. He was about to show his power when Tai Budian turned around and looked at him. Then he whispered in a dignified manner, now, don't be rude to Minister Chu, Quo. His voice was so low that only Wu Kuangyun could hear him. Wu Kuangyun's mouth gaped open in shock. Minister Chu? King of Hell Chu? This guy is King of Hell Chu? Wu Kuangyun recalled the rumors about King of Hell Chu that had spread throughout the entire Iron Cloud. Then he compared that terrifying character with this youngster in front of him. Wu Kuangyun tried hard to match the two. But he found that he couldn't accept this seemingly absurd fact. He opened his mouth to speak. But he saw Tai Buqian's stern gaze looking at him. It was as sharp as a knife. His Majesty obviously doesn't want me to reveal King of Hell Chu's identity? Wu Kuangyun tactfully shut his mouth. But he was thinking in his heart, His Majesty doesn't want King of Hell Chu's identity to be exposed. So why is he telling me? The heaven-splitting mountain pass was in a mess along the way. Collapsed houses and city walls were everywhere. Tai Budian couldn't help but sigh. It was really dangerous. If this wasn't the heaven-splitting mountain pass, I'm afraid that any other city would have turned into a pile of wasteland. Tai Budian climbed the city wall and looked at the lone army outside the city. He looked at them for a long time with his sharp eyes. Then he said, now, Minister Chu, the 500,000 soldiers and horses here will be under your command from now on. Quo. Chu Yang was stunned. Now, me? Quo wink with a frown. Now. Yes, it's you. Quo. Tai Budian trusted him and said, now, I believe that you can end this war as soon as possible. Quo. Chu Yang looked outside the city and said, now, good? Quo. Wu Kuangyun had been following behind him. He finally understood. His Majesty wants King of Hell Chu to command the army. That's why he told me his identity? Humph humph, do you think it's so easy to command the army? A genius isn't equal to a commander. Wu Kuangyun cursed in his heart. Then he heard Tai Budian say, now, General Wu, you're in charge of assisting Minister Chu. You must remind him at any time. He looked at Wu Kuangyun indifferently. Now, do you understand? Quo wink with a frown. Now. I understand. I understand. Now. Wu Kuangyun nodded like a chicken pecking rice. Chu Yang's black robe covered his entire body. It covered his entire face. He held the first military meeting with King of Hell Chu's signature image. In addition, he deliberately emitted a trace of 7 shades cold energy. This made the commander's tent look like an ice cave on this hot summer day. Everyone's entire body was emitting cold air. Several valiant generals of the army weren't convinced at first. They wanted to stir up some trouble. But they felt as if a poisonous snake had crawled up their backs as soon as they met King of Hell Chu's gaze. They felt a chill run down their spines and their scalps went numb. Their hearts melted like snow under the scorching sun. Chapter 387. Everyone was shocked. This minister is very direct. He went straight to the point. He went straight to the point. Has anyone led an army like this since ancient times? They saw the minister flipping through a small booklet in his hand. The bodyguard standing next to him squinted his eyes and almost laughed out loud. The handwriting on this booklet looked like a turtle's crawl. It was very ugly. It was General Wu Kuangyun's handwriting. This was exactly what Chu Yang had forced Wu Kuangyun to write about his understanding of the various generals and their respective characteristics during the 2 hours he had spent on world-defying stage heavens. These people were Wu Kuangyun's old subordinates. So, he obviously knew their strengths like the back of his hand. Chu Yang had to rely on this to make arrangements for the generals. This battle wouldn't be difficult to fight against the exhausted soldiers outside the city. Tai Butian's intention was to let Chu Yang use this battle to train his troops. Wuxia. Chu Yang frowned and said, Amo. General is here. Wu Yi stood up straight with a swoosh. He looked like a tough soldier, but his serious stuttering had greatly reduced his image. The generals burst into laughter. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. He raised his head and said, Are you the deputy commander? Amo. Wu Yi's mouth was foaming. Wu Kuangyun hurriedly translated, reporting to the supreme commander. He wanted to say, I am. Oh. Chu Yang looked at the roaring laughter below. Suddenly his face changed. He slammed the table. What are you laughing at? The generals were stunned. What are you laughing at? It's funny, isn't it? Chu Yang looked at them fiercely. Do you think it's funny that he stutters and you don't stutter? Are you laughing at your own brother? You guys are really united. Is stuttering funny? Speak. He slammed the table heavily. There was complete silence. Wu Yi. Yes. I order you to immediately lead 50,000 elite soldiers out of the city to challenge. Pay attention. After the battle, you don't need to cause a lot of casualties. You only need to mobilize the enemy's troops. Then you immediately lead the troops back. Understood. Wu Yi straightened his chest. Go. Yes. Wu Yi received the order and strode away. Then Chu Yang called out the names of several generals. Basically, every 2 hours, 50,000 soldiers would go out of the city to harass them. Yes, it was harassment. Long Ao was in for a tragedy. He was now secretly letting the army clean up the collapsed mountain. As long as they could make a slope that could allow horses to gallop up, they would be able to leave this place. Of course, this work was deliberately concealed and was extremely secretive. Moreover, it looked like it was about to be completed. At this time, the city gates suddenly opened with a sound. Following that, a group of people surged out like a tide. The leading general shouted under the moonlight, Long? No. You. Do you dare to fight with me? Long Ao was infuriated. What a bastard, coming up to challenge at such a critical juncture, and even coming up with an ending. However, he had no choice but to fight, because the other party was already charging over. In case they rushed into the camp, he wasn't afraid of disturbing the army. But he was afraid that the other party would find out about his movements. Even if one of them managed to escape, Wu Kuangyun would be prepared. Then his army would be annihilated. Therefore, Long Ao had no choice but to hurriedly send troops to resist. Who would have thought that this stuttering general would throw out a sentence after a round of fighting? Ming. Tomorrow? He hadn't even finished speaking when his shadow disappeared. Long Ao smashed his cup in the commander's tent. Another 2 hours passed and another wave came. This wave broke through the vanguard of Great Zhao's army with a loud bang. They immediately retreated after killing and setting fire. Another 2 hours passed, and another wave came. Long Ao flew into a rage. He was at his wit's end. The night passed in such a state of high tension. Dawn broke. Long Ao was pacing back and forth in the commander's tent. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside. It seemed that soldiers were causing trouble. The quartermaster came to report, Supreme Commander, we don't have any food. No food? Long Ao's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Didn't we tell them to divide the rations for 1 day into 3 days? Where are we going to get food at this time? But this is a high-intensity battle. In addition, we haven't slept all night. The soldiers are. The quartermaster was also helpless. They had fallen into this situation. All the military supplies were in the rear. He was the quartermaster. So he didn't have anything in his hands. The only provisions they had after they had been intercepted here were the 3 days' rations that the soldiers had carried with them. The provisions weren't distributed under a unified jurisdiction. They were all in the hands of the soldiers. So, who could bear it if they got hungry? 5 days had already passed. So what else could be left? The noise outside was getting louder and louder. They won't let us eat. How can we fight if we don't let us eat? That's right. Do you want to win the battle on an empty stomach? We want to eat. This group of soldiers was a rough bunch. Only a few of them were literate. In other words, those who could recognize their own names were highly educated people in the army. They had always been like this. Don't have food? Look for an official. We don't care where this is or how critical the situation is. Anyway, we can't go hungry. Long Ao frowned. He lifted the curtain and rushed out in big strides. What are you shouting about? There was a moment of silence. Then someone shouted, "Marshal, we want to eat." With someone taking the lead, everyone's courage grew. They shouted together, "Marshal, we want to eat." Long Ao's cheeks twitched. He said angrily, "No food? If you don't have food, you won't eat horse meat? There are so many dead horses piled up there. Aren't those eaten?" The soldiers cheered, "Eat horse meat, eat horse meat." They left one after another. Then there was another conflict at the dead war horses. Which cavalry didn't treat their war horses as their lives? When their war horses died, they couldn't be more sad. How could they allow others to eat their war horses? Of course they refused this group of hungry soldiers. So the conflict arose. The cavalrymen who were guarding the war horses' corpses were beaten down. Then the soldiers started to argue again. Some complained that they were given less. Some complained that others were given more. It was noisy. In the end, the quartermaster came forward. He gathered the dead war horses together and distributed them uniformly. No one had more and no one had less. Only then was the crisis temporarily averted. However, Long Ao had already seen the signs of destruction. Today we can eat dead horses. Tomorrow we can starve for half a meal. But the day after tomorrow we will have to kill live horses. How can a cavalry be called a cavalry without a horse? Wu Kuangyun appeared while Long Ao was in a terrible fix. General Wu was shouldering a heavy responsibility this time. Minister Chu had sent him to persuade Long Ao to surrender. Everyone could guess that Wu Kuangyun would persuade Long Ao to surrender given his temperament. Will he persuade Long Ao to surrender? This was simply impossible. Because Minister Chu didn't intend to accept Long Ao's surrender. Because Wu Kuangyun's first words angered Long Ao. "Long Ao, fuck your mother. I'm here to persuade you to surrender." Long Ao was so angry that he fainted. Originally, he had thought that he might as well agree for the time being if Wu Kuangyun came to persuade him to surrender. Then he would go to the battlefield and attack Prime Minister Di Wu in passing. This would be considered as atonement for his crime. However, the other party had sent Wu Kuangyun to persuade him to surrender. Is this persuasion? This is a declaration of war, okay? I would rather die than surrender. Long Ao spurred his horse out of the formation. He roared with anger. He waited until he got closer. Then he lowered his voice and said, "Wu Kuangyun, you fucking persuade me to surrender, but you don't know how to persuade me." His voice was very low. Only Wu Kuangyun could hear him. Long Ao's meaning was, "You have come to persuade me to surrender. But you can't have this attitude. How can I agree with your attitude? You have to promise me a high position and generous salary. You have to show me your will. Then I will pretend to consider it. You will persuade me again and again. Then I will surrender. Moreover, you have to give me some face in front of my subordinates in front of the two armies. You can't just shout like a dog and I will surrender. How can there be such a thing?" Wu Kuangyun didn't buy it. He tilted his ear and asked loudly, "What did you say? Speak louder." Long Ao almost died from anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "Wu Kuangyun, you have to show some will to persuade me to surrender, right?" Wu Kuangyun suddenly realized. He lowered his voice and said, "You mean one." Long Ao was delighted. "It seems there's hope." He said in a low voice, "I mean you put forward some conditions." "One." "As if?" Wu Kuangyun winked at him. Long Ao's voice became even lower. "As if, you will make me a great general. Then I will be promoted to an official position. Then how will my subordinates be arranged? How will they be rewarded? You have surrendered, and you still want to be a great general?" Wu Kuangyun shouted. His eyes were wide open in astonishment. His voice was very loud. So many people heard him. Long Ao was so anxious that his face started to sweat. "My dear father, can't you be a little bit quieter?" "Fuck." Wu Kuangyun suddenly shouted, "Even if you are in a hurry to surrender, you won't call me father anymore, right?" Long Ao stared at him. "Why are you staring at me? Tell me, did you just call me father? Isn't that right?" Wu Kuangyun was full of vigor as he shouted loudly. "Wu Kuangyun." Long Ao roared. His face turned red and the corners of his eyes almost cracked. "What are you shouting for?" Wu Kuangyun's voice became louder. "What? You called me your father just now. You still dare to deny it? Long Ao, do you dare to swear to the heavens? Swear in the name of your ancestors that you didn't call me father? Swear. Swear. Swear that you didn't call me father." Sen. Long Ao trembled with anger. He glared at Wu Kuangyun. But he didn't dare to swear. Filial piety was very important in this era. Long Ao was already an old man. Although he didn't mean it that way, he didn't dare to swear on his ancestors. Fuck, you still want to be a great general. You still want to be promoted. You still want to be rewarded. Fuck. Wu Kuangyun's voice was like thunder. I tell you, Long Ao, it's useless to call me father. Kneel down if you surrender. If you don't surrender, I will kill you. What? You want to talk about conditions with us? You must be crazy. Chapter 388. Wu Kuangyun. You. Long Ao pointed his finger at Wu Kuangyun in grief and indignation as he cried out. However, he saw Wu Kuangyun's malicious mockery. He never intended to persuade me to surrender. He was playing with me. Long Ao almost collapsed when this thought arose in his mind. I've always been proud of my intelligence. But I've been played so miserably. The enemy troops at the front and the army at the rear burst into loud boos at the same time. This made Long Ao want to draw his sword and cut his own throat to apologize to the world. Humiliation. Extraordinary humiliation. Long Ao had always been proud and arrogant. Moreover, he had never lost a battle. So, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? Moreover, it was a heavy blow. His troops were already at the end of their rope. The only thing that could keep them afloat was the prestige that he had built up over the years as the main commander. But, the prestige that I've painstakingly built up over the years has been destroyed by the enemy's persuasion. It's over. Long Ao was so angry that he almost couldn't sit still on the horse's back. His vision turned black and his heart turned disheartened. He almost subconsciously turned his horse around and galloped back to his army. So, this is what the generals who have been defeated and humiliated by me in the past were thinking in their hearts. Long Ao suddenly had this thought at this time. Wu Kuangyun didn't chase after him. He just urged his horse to stand still. He looked at Long Ao with a mocking smile on his face. He thought, it seems that the method taught by King of Hell Chu is really useful. Look at this guy. He's so angry that he's half dead. It's so cool. Long Ao galloped back to his army. He saw a lot of doubts and disdain in their eyes. The army was speechless as they looked at him. He had deliberately lowered his voice when he was speaking in front of the army. It was clear that he was pleading. But the enemy didn't lower his voice. The enemy said that Long Ao had called him father. And General Long didn't refute. The enemy forced him to swear. And he only spat out a mouthful of blood. He didn't swear. What does this mean? This means that General Long is begging for mercy. He's begging for good treatment after surrendering. He's even bowing and calling him father. But he's being ruthlessly humiliated. Is this really our Marshal Long? Long Ao felt as if his heart had been struck by a heavy blow as he looked at the silent, doubtful eyes of the crowd. He felt as if a knife had been twisted in his heart. He wanted to say something, but he saw stars in front of his eyes. He opened his mouth and spat out a big mouthful of blood. Suddenly, he felt disheartened and a sense of death welled up in his heart. He turned his horse's head and suddenly shouted, Wu Kuangyun. When I was alive, I couldn't eat your flesh, but when I die, I will chase your soul. I, Long Ao, will never coexist with you in this world. As he roared, blood gushed out of his mouth. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and pulled out his long sword. He then shouted angrily, Wu Kuangyun, wait for me. Tonight, my ghost will come to find you. He brandished his long sword and unexpectedly killed himself on the horse's back. His voice was shrill as if a malicious spirit from hell had suddenly rushed out, howling madly with endless hatred, causing everyone who heard it to feel their hair stand on end. He was dead and his blood was gushing out, but his body didn't collapse. His eyes were still glaring angrily at Wu Kuangyun. His eyes were as deep as a dead fish's, and seemed to be connected to the netherworld. This generation's famous general had finally chosen to commit suicide. Marshal. The bodyguard burst into tears. Marshal. Thousands of people shouted together. They knelt down and wept bitterly. Wu Kuangyun on the opposite side shuddered. Then he suddenly burst into laughter. Fuck, I have killed more than 10 million people in my life. You're not the only one who wants to settle accounts with me for revenge. Come to find me tonight? Then you'll have to line up first. Fuck, you're already dead, but you're still scaring people. Then he waved his arms and shouted, Long Ao is dead. You, when are you going to surrender? He wanted to say, you and the others. But he felt that he couldn't say it out loud. So he had no choice but to say, you and the others. On the city wall, a black robe was fluttering in the wind. Behind the black mask was a pair of cold and ruthless eyes. It was King of Hell Chu. Minister Chu, do we summon these people to surrender or? Tai Butian's eyes flashed as he asked. The general is dead. So, we naturally have to summon them to surrender. Chu Yang insipidly said, execute Long Ao's bodyguards after they surrender. Execute several generals who are leading the troops. Imprison the remaining generals. Then break up the troops and reorganize them. This is a new force. I can understand if the generals are killed or imprisoned. But why execute the bodyguards? Tai Butian frowned. I'm afraid. Now is not the time to think about mercy. Instead, we should think about survival. Survival is the key to the world's hegemony. Chu Yang coldly said, the reason why your majesty doesn't understand is that your majesty doesn't know what a bodyguard is. Bodyguard. These two words aren't in vain. Tai Butian smiled embarrassedly. A general next to him said, your majesty doesn't command the army. So, it's understandable that you don't understand. However, we can't kill many of these bodyguards with our own hands. Because, as Long Ao's bodyguards, most of them will follow him and commit suicide once he dies. His expression was a little heavy as he said, even if they don't die with him, they will still have the thought of taking revenge before they die. He let out a long sigh. Your Majesty, this is what Minister Chu meant by bodyguards. He paused for a moment and said, the so-called bodyguards are the real hardcore. In other words, they are the embodiment of the word loyalty. Often, there is an unstable rule on the battlefield. That is, the basic condition to measure a famous general is to see whether his bodyguards will die for him. How many people are willing to die for him? Tai Butian was stunned. Sure enough, after Long Ao died, some of his bodyguards wailed on the spot and cut themselves with their swords. The soldiers of Iron Cloud saw that the situation was hopeless after they started to surrender. So, they put down their weapons one after another. The remaining bodyguards killed many of their comrades in anger. Then their comrades fought back and chopped them into meat paste. Iron Cloud's army didn't move. The ordinary soldiers of Great Zhao and the bodyguards of Iron Cloud were fighting a bloody battle. Each of the bodyguards had tears on their faces. They crazily chopped and killed while crazily shouting, the great commander isn't that kind of person. The great commander isn't that kind of person. You have blasphemed the great commander. You. Such tragic cries didn't disappear until the 3,000 bodyguards were completely buried. In fact, when there was only one person left, that person was still shouting with all his might when he made the last slash, isn't the marshal? This voice was very loud. It seemed to be shouting for the great commander's eternal rest. It was to clear the great commander's name, and to protect the great commander's reputation. It all originated from the unconditional trust of the great commander when he was alive. When everyone misunderstood, the bodyguards sacrificed their lives to offer a final song of praise to the man they were loyal to. The great commander was worthy of our sacrifice. But his voice froze right there. His body was also submerged in the flashes of the swords. Their blood and vigor soared to the sky, just like their loyalty. Tai Butian looked at the bloody scene and sighed deeply. What a pity. Such a famous general died so sullenly. It's a pity? Chu Yang said indifferently, Your Majesty is overflowing with camaraderie. It's undesirable. His words weren't polite at all, but Tai Butian wasn't angry at all. She asked, why? The so-called famous generals have survived hundreds of battles. Naturally, every general has his own loyal followers. When a general dies, many people will be buried with him. And these people are all willing to do it. This is the charm of the general himself. He said indifferently, if he doesn't deserve to be a general. On the battlefield, this kind of thing is too common. Some generals will even deliberately gather some homeless people, orphans and prisoners on death row as their own subordinates. Because they know that these people have nothing. Even if it's just a smile, they will die for them. What's more, the grace of a new life. Besides, this is a war between two countries and not a civil war within the country, right? Tai Butian asked with a smile. That's right. I understand. The alliance won't pay dividends and won't let the tiger return to the mountain. But, as long as I see such a scene, I can't help but feel touched. Tai Butian laughed and said, because there are so many heroes in the world, but I can't use all of them. Chu Yang was silent for a while. Then he said, when all the heroes in the world are used by the ruler can only turn them into mediocre people. When the birds are gone, the bow is hidden. When the cunning rabbit is dead, the hound is cooked. Although it's cruel, it's also inevitable after unification. Tai Budian was silent. After a long time she sighed deeply and said, "That's right." These words were obviously derogatory, but Tai Budian and Chu Yang both knew that this was the way to rule a country. When the birds are gone, the bough is no longer hidden. Who is to be shot at? When the cunning rabbit is gone, if the hound is not cooked, it will only bring disaster to the world. At the very least, it will be an unstable factor. Generals all knew that war was for peace. But when there was true peace, it was when the general retired. The greatest value of a soldier could only be reflected in the cruelty of war. That was all. War needed to raise morale, but peace needed stability and harmony. This was an irreconcilable contradiction to begin with. Tai Budian turned her head and looked at Chu Yang. She said deeply, "Minister Chu, I didn't expect you to have such a thorough understanding of the way to rule a country. Since ancient times, people have used the phrase, 'the bough is hidden after the birds are gone,' to scold those in power. But hearing it from you today, I realize that although this phrase is unpleasant to hear, it's actually a true way to rule a country. As long as the bough isn't destroyed after the birds are gone, it's already the magnanimity of an emperor," Chu Yang said quietly. Tai Budian took a deep breath and said firmly, "Absolutely not." This sentence was akin to an oath of allegiance. The conversation between the two was a little solemn. After this sentence, both of them didn't speak anymore. After a long time, Chu Yang raised his eyebrows and said, "We can open the city gates to accept the surrender." Tai Budian heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. The battle here has finally come to an end. His face was smiling, but he was thinking in his heart, "We're about to go to the main battlefield and Yao Chanshan is there." I don't know. Regarding the bough being hidden after the birds are gone, this is just my personal understanding. I suddenly felt emotional. Everyone can just take a look. Chapter 389. After Minister Chu took control of the army, he played a small trick. The enemy's 400,000 soldiers took off their armor and surrendered. He ended the battle without shedding a drop of blood. The enemy had reached a dead end. So Minister Chu had resorted to trickery. But one couldn't deny that Minister Chu's strategy had no problems. He had acted swiftly and decisively the moment he had assumed office. He had continuously harassed the enemy dozens of times in one night. This had made the enemy panic. It was like removing salt from a wound. He had asked Wu Kuangyun to go out and persuade the enemy to surrender. Wu Kuangyun had a special status. So, he had personally come to persuade the enemy to surrender. Long Ao would have been despised if he hadn't come out. Moreover, he had sent Wu Kuangyun to persuade the enemy to surrender. This had given Long Ao a vague hint, "We can talk." That's because the status of both sides was high enough. Long Ao had reached the end of his rope. Wu Kuangyun's arrival had given him an opportunity to regain his face. So he had no choice but to go out. Moreover, Long Ao had to go out under such circumstances. This chapter is provided by Baidu Tieba of the world-defying stage Heavens. Wu Kuangyun would have driven Long Ao crazy if he hadn't angered him to death in accordance with King of Hell Chu's teachings. Of course, Long Ao would have lost his prestige in the army at the very least. There would have been a commotion at most under normal circumstances. But he would have lost his prestige in this life-and-death situation, and that would have been the end of him. So Long Ao had committed suicide. The 400,000 soldiers had lost their leader. They had lost confidence in Long Ao. In fact, they even despised him. Moreover, they were in a desperate situation. So what else could they do but surrender? Even after this incident, they still refused to accept King of Hell Chu's decision. They thought, "I could have done it at such a time." However, this thought disappeared without a trace after they had taken over the army. And they had seen that Long Ao had secretly ordered people to open up a big slope. This slope would have been completed in half a day at most. If the general's thoughts before Chu Yang's arrival had been to wait for the enemy to starve to death and take advantage of the situation, then these 400,000 soldiers would have flown away right under their noses. That would be like a cooked duck flying away. If things really turned out like that, the generals would probably even have the heart to kill themselves. The generals were drenched in cold sweat when they were talking about how to deal with these captives. Especially the surrendered generals who had entered the commander's tent. They were so scared that they almost pissed their pants. Because Minister Chu had said, "Kill them all." Minister Chu was wearing a black robe and a black veil as he spoke. His eyes were cold and cruel without the slightest bit of emotion. Everyone was horrified. As the ruler of a country, Tai Budian repeatedly pleaded for leniency, believing that this move was against the harmony of the heavens. However, King of Hell Chu said, "What's wrong with that? Wasn't it just 400,000 people? Since I can smash 100,000 people to death, why would I care about a blood debt of 400,000? Hearing this, all the generals felt their bodies cramp. So, that extremely terrifying landslide that day was also caused by this King of Hell Chu? Oh my god, is he still human? None of the generals dared to say anything. Minister Chu was determined to kill. He even said, "Let them dig a big hole by themselves, then drive them all in and bury themselves alive." Tai Butian repeatedly pleaded for leniency. Therefore, King of Hell Chu seemed to have no choice but to relent under the sincere pleas of the ruler of a country. Obviously he was very unhappy. Threatening, he said, "Today is for His Majesty, otherwise I will kill you all. But, if any of these captives isn't obedient, I will kill the whole team. If any of them isn't obedient, I will bury all 400,000 of them alive." The surrendered generals walked out of the big tent after the terrifying meeting was over. Their legs were weak. Their faces were pale and they were wiping their sweat. They were scared witless as they returned to their troops. Then they ordered, "No one is allowed to act blindly without thinking. Motherfucker, anyone who moves will be whipped." They also explained, His Majesty the Emperor of Iron Cloud had repeatedly argued with reason. So he had saved our lives from King of Hell Chu's butcher's knife. One could well imagine what the response would be like. Chu Yang and Tai Butian played the role of good cop and bad cop. They pacified the captives and handed them over to Wu Yi. Then they left behind 150,000 soldiers to guard the heaven-splitting mountain pass, and led 300,000 soldiers to return in triumph to the main battlefield. Whether it was the defending generals or the surrendered generals, everyone heaved a sigh of relief when King of Hell Chu left. They didn't know what was going on. Perhaps it was a psychological effect, but they felt as if a thick layer of low clouds had shrouded the heaven-splitting mountain pass as soon as they saw King of Hell Chu's black robe. Tai Butian was grinning from ear to ear on the way. "Minister Chu, you played the role of bad cop very well." Lian was also doubtful. "Didn't you say that you wanted to surrender? So, why did you suddenly want to massacre them?" Fortunately, Lian's brain worked quickly. Chu Yang tilted his head and looked at Tai Butian with a strange look in his eyes. "Your Majesty thinks that I'm joking?" Tai Butian's complexion changed. She said while stammering, "Don't tell me, you're not." Chu Yang smiled and said in a cold voice, "These are merely 400,000 people. There's no harm in killing them. You must know that these captives may become the biggest variable if Diwu Qingro doesn't get defeated. After all, this is the heaven-splitting mountain pass. It's better to kill them cleanly. Once and for all. You don't need to worry about anything." Tai Butian was dumbstruck. She realized that she had broken out in cold sweat after a long while. 400,000 people. You want to kill them, and you want to kill them? Of course you're going to be the lord of this world in the future. So, killing them all won't have a good influence on you. So, you pleaded for mercy and I pushed the boat along with the current to give you face, Chu Yang said calmly. Black lines appeared on Tai Butian's forehead. Lian's face is really big. Tai Longqing hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights by the time Chu Yang and Tai Butian arrived at the main battlefield barracks. Tai Longqing was burning with anxiety because of the constant reports of the heaven-splitting mountain pass movements. Tai Longqing flew into a rage when he heard that Wu Kuangyun had left His Majesty behind, and had run back to the heaven-splitting mountain pass to fight the enemy. He wanted to go there himself. He wanted to chop off Wu Kuangyun's dog head even if the entire front was routed. Tai Longqing was so angry that he vomited blood. He hadn't been able to eat or sleep well these past few days. Each day felt like a year. Tai Longqing almost fainted from excitement when he saw Tai Butian return. He rushed over to greet her. His old eyes were almost brimming with tears. Tai Butian sensitively discovered that Chu Yang, who was beside her, had already disappeared without a trace. Niao Qianshan knew that he had gone to replace Wu Kuangyun. She felt an indescribable sense of loss in her heart. Chu Yang rushed into Butian Pavilion's tent. Based on Wu Qianshan's habits, Chu Yang did not hesitate to find her tent. His speed was extremely fast. It was as if a light breeze had blown by, and he was already gone. He was about to open the door when he suddenly heard a sigh from inside. Chu Yang was startled. He couldn't help but stop his footsteps. His Majesty has returned. Has he returned? Niao Qianshan sat on the chair in a daze. Her heart was in a mess. Niao Qianshan wanted to be the first to run out when she heard that the army had returned. However, she stopped when she reached the door. What if, what if he hasn't returned? What if His Majesty has brought back bad news? What should I do? This chapter is provided by the world-defying stage Heaven's Baidu Tieba. She was worried about personal gains and losses. She didn't dare to move even a step. The truth was right in front of her. She would see it as long as she went out. However, she didn't dare to take this step no matter what. She was afraid that she would cry when she saw Chu Yang return. She was also afraid that Chu Yang hadn't returned, and was dead. She was afraid and hopeful. Her heart was in a mess. She couldn't make up her mind. Suddenly her eyes darkened. A voice said, "Minister Chu, what national affairs are you thinking about?" Wu Qianshan's body trembled. She didn't dare to turn around. She closed her eyes and opened them again. A slender jade-like hand was about to pinch her arm. Am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? Then she viciously pinched him. It doesn't hurt? Wu Qianshan didn't believe it. She pinched again. It still doesn't hurt? She opened her eyes in disappointment. She said dejectedly, "It's really a dream, sigh." A voice that seemed to be grimacing in pain said, "Sister, of course it doesn't hurt. You pinched my arm. My poor arm is already purple." Wu Qianshan screamed and jumped up. Her chair flipped over with a bang. She turned around in surprise. However, she saw a distorted face. Chu Yang sucked in cold air and said, "Sister, please, let go of your hand." Wu Qianshan looked down. She saw that her slender jade-like fingers were pinching Chu Yang's arm. She had jumped up and turned around. However, she didn't let go. Moreover, she had unconsciously used too much strength in her surprise. She knew that his flesh had been twisted by 310 degrees. She quickly let go. She didn't know what to do for a moment. Should I throw myself at him and hug him? Or should I pretend that nothing happened? However, Niao Qianshan's eyes were already red. Tears streamed down her face. She felt her heart beating wildly. She was so excited that she felt that it was worth it even if she died at this moment. Because he came back safe and sound. He came back. I'm back. Chu Yang smiled and said, "You were worried, right?" Niao Qianshan smiled sadly. She quickly wiped her tears and turned around. She said, "It's good that you're back. You've made people worried these days." Niao Qianshan's voice had been very emotional when she had started to speak. She was trembling. However, she had calmed down by the time she had finished speaking. She turned around and looked at Chu Yang. She smiled and said, "You're back. I can finally relax. It's been such a long time. I'm really tired." Chu Yang saw that Wu Qianshan was trying her best to control her emotions. He suddenly felt a lump in his throat. It seemed that some kind of emotion was blocking his heart. He couldn't breathe. He forced himself to control himself and said, "Yes, it's been hard on you." Wu Qianshan smiled faintly and said, "You sit down. I'll go get you a cup of water." She turned around and left. The two of them had been separated for a long time. However, they were trying their best to talk about irrelevant things. They were trying their best to control themselves. They were afraid that they would overstep their boundaries. Wu Qianshan turned around and walked out of the tent. But her small mouth suddenly flattened. Then she covered her mouth with all her might. Her tears started to flow out violently. But she controlled them with all her might. She didn't make any sound. She walked faster and faster until she finally reached a corner. Then she squatted down and started to cry silently. Chapter 390. By the time Wu Qianshan returned, she had already regained her usual appearance. Her eyes were a little red, but her whole person looked bright and beautiful. Her style was peerless. It seemed as if a long-lost vitality had returned to her body at this moment. She did not say anything, nor did she do anything. When Chu Yang was not around, she took over his role. She was king of Helchu. She was the black robe that intimidated the entire Iron Cloud. She was flawless. She killed decisively for him. She commanded heroes for him. She crossed thousands of miles for him. She used thunderous methods for him. She was resourceful for him. She was sinister and vicious for him. She bore everything for him. No one knew what kind of effort she had to put in to do all this. To be able to imitate a man to such an extent as a woman, she had to have a deep understanding of this person. She had to have an unforgettable impression of this person. However, when Chu Yang returned, she suddenly became the same Wu Qianshan who quietly accompanied Chu Yang, quietly watched him, and quietly assisted him when he was around. She was such a woman. She would never force herself to ask for anything, nor would she get anything. She would only silently wait and silently contribute herself. She was very smart. She could clearly see Chu Yang's daily behavior. Therefore she understood. Therefore she did not force herself. Therefore she would only silently endure and silently love herself. I love you. This is my business. It has nothing to do with you. I never said that you have to accept me because I love you. I don't even want you to realize my feelings. I don't want you to feel embarrassed. If you want to leave, you can leave. But I am here. If you want to go back, you can go back. I am here. But as long as you don't take the initiative to confess to me, I will never take the initiative to say these words to you. Chu Yang, I like you. I won't. I'm not afraid of your rejection. But I am afraid of waking up from my dream. Because in my dream you are mine. After a long silence, Wu Qianqian began to speak. Her voice was very dull. Chu Yang, that second martial uncle Li Jinsong, I have already taken care of him. Chu Yang was startled. Not only him. There are many people from beyond the heavens sect. I have already taken care of all of them. Niao Qianqian said calmly, this group of people will cause too much trouble in the future. Who knows when they will cause trouble? Once something happens, it will be a big problem. So I might as well clean them all up. Chu Yang's mouth became two big mouths. How did you clean it up? Chu Yang closed his mouth after a long while. He only felt that his chin had almost fallen off. He kept gagging. This girl was really good at pranks. To think that he would even deal with his martial uncles one by one. Wasn't he afraid that his father would make things difficult for him? I wanted to wait for you to come back and clean it up, but I thought that since you have been expelled from the sect, it would be inconvenient. Niao Qianqian said lightly, so I thought that I might as well do it for you. Chu Yang gave him a thumbs up. You're so thoughtful. Li Jinsong was poisoned because of his woman. It is called the spring and autumn heartbreak powder. In other words, it will flare up once a year. If there is no medicine to suppress it, the victim will suffer for 3 days and 3 nights before dying. All of his internal organs will rot. Second martial uncle had always been dissatisfied with father's decision to take charge of Beyond the Heavens sect. So, the Golden Horse Riders department came looking for him at that time. They said that they could provide him with medicine, and that they could help him take charge of Beyond the Heavens sect. So, he was easily manipulated. Wu Qianqian continued, moreover he loves his woman very much. But Golden Horse Riders department only provided him with medicine to temporarily suppress the poison. As for the crystal spirit mushroom, they didn't give him anything. They just left him hanging. I see. Chu Yang nodded. Well, when he was eavesdropping, Li Jinsong had asked those people for the crystal spirit mushroom, but it was to no avail. Then, he remembered that he had once entered the treasury of Golden Horse Riders department. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. It wasn't that Golden Horse Riders department didn't want to give it to him, but that thing. Golden Horse Riders department didn't have it. How did you deal with it? Chu Yang asked. Killed him. Niao Qianqian's face was a little sad. I don't know why, but he had a premonition. He chose to assassinate Tai Longqing at night. In the end, he was besieged by people from Butian Pavilion and died on the spot. Before he died, he begged father to let go of his wife and son. But after that woman knew about this, she committed suicide. Niao Qianqian sighed and said, before she died she said, I don't care if he is a good man or a bad man. As long as he is alive, I will accompany him. As long as he is dead, I will go find him. After so many years, I've really caused him enough suffering. Now that I've reached the netherworld, I can finally stop causing him trouble and repay him properly. If this matter was told by someone else, it might have been an undying love. But when it came from Wu Qianqian's mouth, it was as plain as water. But it still contained a heavy charm. Chu Yang listened and sighed. Li Jianyin was expelled. His legs were broken. I am afraid. Niao Qianqian continued, as for the others, those who should be killed were killed, and those who should be crippled were crippled. They have all been cleaned up. Chu Yang was speechless. Niao Qianqian spoke plainly, but when she did this, she had to endure a lot of psychological pressure. Chu Yang could imagine it even if he only thought about it. I have an idea. Wu Qianqian looked at him and whispered, wait until the war is over. If Iron Cloud is defeated, everything will be taken care of. If Iron Cloud wins, let father and the others go back to Beyond the Heavens sect and rebuild Beyond the Heavens sect. They don't want Iron Cloud to be consecrated as a national sect. They don't want to hold any positions in the imperial court. Good. Chu Yang was full of admiration. This move of retreating in the face of adversity without any reward was really the best move. I have done everything for you, but I don't want anything. But you are the Emperor of Iron Cloud, the ruler of the world. You can't shortchange us, right? Moreover, I am now the same as you. I am no longer a disciple of Beyond the Heavens sect. Miao Qianqian lowered her eyes. Her expression could not be seen clearly. Why? Chu Yang was startled. Because you will leave sooner or later. So I will be the king of Hell Chu for a long time. Miao Qianqian smiled gently and added, the king of Hell Chu of this generation. Her laughter was cold and indifferent. It was as calm as stagnant water. She said, you Chu Yang are only a passerby. So you are not the king of Hell Chu. You are the king of Hell Chu for a lifetime. The king of Hell Chu of this generation? The king of Hell Chu? The king of Hell Chu? Such an outstanding beauty with peerless talent would hide behind a black robe for a lifetime? Her youthful elegance and charm would be covered up for a lifetime. Chu Yang's heart suddenly felt as if it was being overturned. He looked at her in a daze. He only felt that his heart was in a mess. Wu Qianqian gently turned her head. Her eyes were like limpid autumn waters. They swept across Chu Yang's face. Chu Yang clearly felt a bone-piercing pain. Then he heard her say, using your identity as the king of Hell Chu to make Beyond the Heavens sect immortal. Wasn't this your ultimate plan when you supported me in the beginning? Chu Yang felt a pain in his heart. He felt as if the pain had swept over him. His mind went blank in an instant. Iron Cloud readied its troops and horses and prepared for war. Tai Butian had returned with 300,000 troops. Moreover, the number of troops in the country had increased over this period of time. So, the total number of troops had already exceeded 3 million. Great Zhao had nearly 1 million troops. But they had lost more than 1 million at the heaven-splitting mountain pass. So, they only had 4 million troops left. Both sides were almost evenly matched. Tai Longcheng's heart had been in suspense for a long time. But he finally felt relieved. Tai Butian and Chu Yang had arrived at Iron Cloud's military camp that night. Suddenly the Great Zhao's camp burst into thunderous cheers. It was like a tsunami. It didn't disperse for a long time. It was as lively as the New Year's celebration. Then a big flag was hoisted high from Great Zhao's military camp. A golden dragon was treading on the white clouds. The two words Diwu were swaying in the wind. The whistling summer wind made a rustling sound. Its imposing aura was vigorous as if it wanted to dominate the world. Diwu Qingro had arrived. It wasn't clear whether it was a coincidence or deliberate. In short, Tai Longcheng, Tai Butian, and Diwu Qingro had been fighting for several years. And King of Hell Chu and Diwu Qingro brazenly faced each other at this moment. This battle would decide the fate of the world. Diwu Qingro's complacent expression was swept away. His face was as calm as water. He stepped into the commander's tent. His heart was burning with anger. He had received the news that Jin Nangkai and the others had been annihilated the day before. This news was like a bolt from the blue. It had thrown Diwu Qingro, who had always been calm and composed, into a mess. He had anticipated that it would be impossible for those three armies to be annihilated. However, he couldn't help but sigh when he heard the report. He didn't say anything. The mountains suddenly collapsed and the ground cracked. The slanting valley was filled up. Hundreds of thousands of people were buried alive. More than 1 million soldiers were divided into two sections. The outside couldn't enter and the inside couldn't come out. This is the will of heaven. Diwu Qingro's heart was somewhat heavy. Great Zhao's army was much more than iron clouds on the surface. But he knew that there was a clear difference in the fighting strength of both sides. Iron Cloud was located in the north. So its people were valiant. Except for a few people, almost everyone could fight on horseback. And they could dismount and fight on foot. As long as there were enough war horses, there would be as many cavalry soldiers as there were war horses. On the other hand, Great Zhao's army couldn't do that. It was located in the south. The climate was mild. And the people there were soft and tender. They weren't on the same level as the fierce and rough soldiers of Iron Cloud. Therefore, Diwu Qingro could only use his wisdom to make up for it. However, Diwu Qingro also had a great consolation. King of Hell Chu is dead. Otherwise, it would have been very troublesome for me to face the Iron Cloud Triangle alone. Jing Minghun had rushed to Diwu Qingro's side with bruises all over his body. Diwu Qingro couldn't believe his eyes. He was a peak king level expert. He had dispatched millions of people to kill a revered level expert like King of Hell Chu. And Jing Minghun had crippled him. Moreover, his body was covered with cuts and bruises. He had almost lost his life. This was beyond everyone's expectations. However, Diwu Qingro had heard that hundreds of people had attacked King of Hell Chu at the end of the battle. And Jing Minghun had successfully launched a sneak attack. He felt that King of Hell Chu was dead. And Jing Minghun was very confident. Even an emperor-level expert wouldn't have been able to withstand that kind of attack. Diwu Qingro sighed the next day. It's a pity that King of Hell Chu wasn't able to fight a decisive battle with such a hero on the battlefield. It's a real regret of my life. Suddenly, a soldier came to report. Prime Minister, a man from Iron Cloud has come out. He's wearing black clothes, a black robe and a black veil. He claims to be an old friend of the Prime Minister's mansion. He says that he wants to thank the Prime Minister for his generosity in gifting the orchid incense to you. So, he wants to talk with the Prime Minister. Chapter 391. Then he looked at Jing Minghun with a gentle gaze. Jing Minghun's complexion turned deathly pale. He cried out, "This is impossible." Diwu Qingro insipidly said, "He's here." "What's impossible?" Jing Minghun was in a daze. Diwu Qingro had already stood up. A group of Iron Cloud soldiers were standing in neat rows on the battlefield. They were standing in a quiet manner. The east wind was blazing. Iron Cloud's military flag was pointed straight to the sky. Then it was blown up neatly with a flapping sound. The fluttering sound of the military flag could make anyone who heard it feel a desire to kill. It was a desire for war. 2 fast horses were standing motionless in front of the troops. 2 men were standing upright on the backs of the horses. It couldn't be seen how old they were. They were standing in front of a magnificent army. But they still looked somewhat blurry under the blazing sun. They couldn't be seen clearly. In front of them, a black horse stood alone. There was a man on the horse. He was dressed in black and wore a black robe. He wore a ferocious golden mask. His loose black robe made a sharp sound as it fluttered in the wind of the east wind. Around the black-clothed man, a biting cold aura was constantly surging and churning. He was alone on his horse. But the soldiers of the Great Zhao army on the other side had a clear feeling in their hearts. It was as if an ancient devil god had suddenly drilled out from the depths of hell. He had appeared in broad daylight. Wherever his sharp gaze landed, everyone felt a bone-chilling coldness. King of Hell Chu. He didn't need to announce his name. But the soldiers of Great Zhao couldn't help but think of this name as soon as they saw him. Only this kind of imposing manner, could be on par with Prime Minister Diwu. Only such a person could withstand the all-out pursuit of the Golden Horse Riders Department. And he had violently galloped for a distance of 13,000 miles. And he had appeared here at this moment. The bugle horn of Great Zhao's army resounded in a desolate manner. The entire army suddenly parted like a tide. It left a quiet and dry road between them. Everyone's eyes became full of respect and fanaticism at this moment. The sound of hoofbeats slowly resounded. Diwu Qingro's guards appeared. Diwu Qingro appeared in front of King of Hell Chu with a faint smile on his face. The guard was somewhat hesitant, but Diwu Qingro pointed his folding fan forward. His attitude was very firm. The guards had no choice but to continue to carry him forward. They only stopped when they crossed the line. Then Diwu Qingro waved his hand and all the soldiers retreated. Only Diwu Qingro's carefree chair was left on the battlefield, and he was facing a 1,000-man army all by himself. Then Diwu Qingro slightly raised his head. He looked at Chu Yang and smiled. His smile was light, but it contained many kinds of gratitude. The 2 shadows were somewhat restless. Diwu Qingro is rumored to not know any martial arts. This is a heaven-sent opportunity. What if he were to kill or capture him now? The 2 moved slightly and Chu Yang was startled. He shouted in a low voice, "Do you want to die?" Ing was stunned. Diwu Qingro is an emperor-level expert. Chu Yang said in a low voice. The 2 shadows broke out in a cold sweat, and their eyes became dull. Emperor-level expert? Diwu Qingro had deceived the world? Then Chu Yang urged his warhorse. The warhorse resolutely walked towards Diwu Qingro step by step. The distance was getting closer and closer. Why? The distance between the 2 was less than 30 feet. This was a very dangerous distance. Especially for Chu Yang, it was even more dangerous. Then Chu Yang stopped the warhorse and raised his eyes to look at Diwu Qingro. Diwu Qingro also raised his head at this time. He looked at Chu Yang with a warm gaze. Their eyes met. It was unknown why, but all the soldiers behind them who knew that these 2 men were meeting today felt a strange feeling rise in their hearts the moment their eyes met. It seemed as if the whole world had suddenly shaken at this moment. Then it suddenly became dark. Then Diwu Qingro laughed in a relaxed manner. He sat on the carefree chair. His whole body was extremely relaxed. He said, "It's not easy to meet you." Chu Yang replied with equal harshness, "Prime Minister Diwu also doesn't go out of the house." Diwu Qingro laughed happily and said, "I need qualifications internally. I also need qualifications externally." Chu Yang also laughed. His meeting with Diwu Qingro today was also a stroke of genius. Originally, he thought that he would hide in the dark and use his own energy to cause destruction. Then he would wait for the right opportunity to strike. However, Chu Yang thought for a long time. Then he gave up and decided to meet directly. The news that King of Hell Chu was still alive would not be hidden from Diwu Qingro sooner or later. However, if he knew from other people's mouths, his heart would have a buffer. He would be mentally prepared. Diwu Qingro would quickly adjust himself. He would not be swayed by this news. Moreover, he would quickly formulate countermeasures. When he met Chu Yang again, he would have a sense of accomplishment. He would have a sense of satisfaction that everything was under his control. However, Chu Yang had suddenly jumped out and asked to see Diwu Qingro when Diwu Qingro was fully confident that the acting king was dead. This was a heavy blow to Diwu Qingro's complacency. This would make Diwu Qingro feel frustrated. So he didn't die. I paid such a big price and he didn't die. What Chu Yang needed was for Diwu Qingro to feel frustrated. Even if it was only a trace, it would make him feel that everything had deviated from his control. This was because the deciding factor of this war was not the number of troops. It was Diwu Qingro. If Diwu Qingro continued to take every possibility into account, then Iron Cloud's side would have gone all out. It would have been a long and arduous war. And they would have been defeated in the end. Therefore, Chu Yang had to do everything he could to break Diwu Qingro's mental state. And this sudden meeting was his first move. Diwu Qingro looked at his ferocious mask with some interest. He laughed and said, "You should have let those two come." Chu Yang smiled mischievously, "Come? I would have given you a chance to make a move. Would I have given you enough reason to kill the three of us in front of everyone?" "No." Diwu Qingro smiled, "They would have died if they had come. But you? I'm not sure." He gently exhaled and said casually, "The mysterious King of Hell Chu. The King of Hell Chu who slaughtered the entire 13,000-mile border of Great Jiao." "Ha!" Chu Yang laughed. "It is my honor to receive such an evaluation from the Prime Minister." Diwu Qingro was silent for a while. Then he said, "In Great Jiao those two Chus, were you?" "Yes." Chu Yang did not hide anything. There was no point in denying it at this moment. "Well, you were the one who received my palm, right?" Diwu Qingro asked, but his tone was firm. "Yes." "Well?" Diwu Qingro's tone became calmer. He said, "You were the one who entered my hidden treasure house, right?" "Hidden treasure house?" Chu Yang frowned. "Not you." Diwu Qingro asked softly. "No." Chu Yang said. That was a mysterious ability that involved Jie Sun. How could Chu Yang admit it? "So it wasn't you." Diwu Qingro said quietly. He carefully observed Chu Yang's facial expression from the corner of his eye. It was so sharp that it seemed as if it could penetrate his mask and see every inch of his face. After a long time, Diwu Qingro slowly said, "It seems that it was someone else." Unconsciously, he let out a sigh of relief. King of Hell Chu is not the master of Jie Sun. "Prime Minister, you must take good care of the hidden treasure house." Chu Yang reminded him, "It would be a huge loss if one or two items were taken away from such an important place." "Are you taking pleasure in other people's misfortune?" Diwu Qingro laughed involuntarily. Then, his eyes slowly became sharp as he said, "You didn't come to see me today to talk nonsense." Chu Yang nodded seriously. "Actually, today I really just want to see what kind of person Prime Minister Diwu is. He is the ruler of the entire Great Jiao and has the entire world in his hands." Diwu Qingro smiled slowly. "It is also a pleasure to watch the war." He calmly looked at Chu Yang. "The moment you appeared and asked to see me, I knew that the war between the two countries had begun. Prime Minister Diwu, you must go all out in this war of the world." Chu Yang's eyes gradually became sharp. He softly said, "You have a great reputation. Don't ruin it." "I will go all out." Diwu Qingro slowly nodded. He didn't respond to Chu Yang's aggressiveness. Instead, he simply and calmly stated a fact. "Let's see who can decide the fate of this battlefield. Let's see who can rise and fall." "King of Hell Chu, ha ha ha." Diwu Qingro softly said, "Don't let me down." I'm afraid that the Prime Minister will exceed your expectations. Chu Yang said indifferently. Suddenly he fiercely looked at Diwu Qingro. His eyes were as sharp as swords. It seemed as if two fierce divine swords were piercing through the blue dome of heaven. Diwu Qingro was still calm. But his pupils slightly shrank as he said, "Even if it is beyond my expectations, I must face it. I must win." Both of them no longer spoke. The sun was shining in the sky. There were no clouds for thousands of miles. However, everyone in the army behind the two of them could feel that a storm was coming. It seemed as if the entire blue sky was about to collapse at this moment. After a long time, Chu Yang looked up at the sky and insipidly said, "Prime Minister, if you lose this war, your name, Diwu Qingro, will be immortalized on this continent. The world will remember the name Diwu Qingro. It will become a legend." Diwu Qingro calmly said, "After the destruction of Iron Cloud, I promise to write a biography of you. I will make the name of King of Hell Chu a legend of the continent." Both of them laughed together. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.